the Wednesday, March 7th session of the Portland City Council. It is Wednesday here in Portland, Oregon. Carla, please call the roll.
Fritz.
Here.
Fish.
Here.
Saltzman.
Here.
Udaley.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. Robert.
Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being discussed at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it.
Thanks very much.
The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you are in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations, will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for your help making your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Good morning, everybody. And you've now heard the council rules. It is my responsibility as the presiding officer to enforce those rules fairly. And as those of you who are frequent attenders, you know that is exactly what I will do. I also want to make a couple of announcements. Dirk Vanderhart, who is sitting in the back of the room, I want to embarrass him a little bit. I don't have that option very often. It is his last day with the Portland Mercury today. So this is the last time we'll see him here in council chambers. Could we suspend rules for a moment and thank Dirk for his service? Now, he's not disappearing. He is not disappearing. He is moving on to a great opportunity with OPB, and you'll be at the state level, is that correct? That's right. Very good. So congratulations on that opportunity. I think you'll do fantastically well there.
Thank you for your service with the Mercury. It's been really, really good, not fake news.
And I also want to reiterate my thanks to everybody who participated in and helped plan last week's session on the Welcoming Inclusive Sanctuary City Task Force. There was a lot of work that went into that. I've received a lot of good feedback from that since, and I want to thank everybody who was engaged in that process. This is a good time to remind us all that through that process we have further cemented our community standards. We have made an affirmative decision that declaring ourselves a sanctuary city isn't just about the term, it is about action. And so I want to thank my colleagues and I want to thank the members of that task force for putting into concrete terms specific actions that we will take as a city to underscore that we are a welcoming, inclusive sanctuary city. Our community values were made clear. We reject racism. We reject white supremacy. We reject sexism. We reject homophobia. We reject Islamophobia. We reject xenophobia. And we reject all forms of discrimination. And I just think it's great that we have a group of engaged citizens that represent the breadth of our community who are working very hard to ensure that we are successful. After all, we will not be successful as a community unless everybody is successful in this community. So with that, we have communications first. Please read the first communications.
Item 206, request of Mary Helen Kincaid to address council regarding alternative housing for houseless individuals.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Mary Ellen Kincaid and Linda Netakoven have asked.
And Michael Molinaro as well.
And Michael Molinaro. You still need to read them, is that correct, Carla?
Probably should.
Okay, just to be safe.
Okay. 207, request of Linda Netakoven to address council regarding alternative housing for houseless individuals. And 208, request of Michael Molinaro to address council regarding alternative housing for houseless individuals.
Very good. And so you'll work with them to reschedule.
Yes.
Thank you. Next individual, please.
Item 209, request of Joey Gibson to address council regarding sexual assault in the Portland area.
3 minutes, name for the record. Again, folks, I will enforce the rules. Please do not interrupt testimony.
My name is Joey Gibson. I'm here to talk about, hopefully, I'm not here to yell and scream, make a huge scene. I'm hoping I can reach out to one of you today. I believe that there's an epidemic going on in Portland. It is the capital of human trafficking. There are tons of kids, there are girls and boys that are disappearing from the streets, and they're taking them up and down the I-5 corridor. And I understand that it's not great for you politically to bring light to this problem. It's a problem that you have, and it's being swept under the rug. It is easier to ignore it as a politician, but I do believe that not all politicians are bad. Like, I do believe that some people do this because they want to help their community. They want to help the people. And this is a problem that we have. It is the capital in the United States of America. There are boys and girls being swept away and being sexually assaulted, being sold into slavery. And one of the biggest problems is we have, you guys politically have a connection with Terry Bean, and you need to speak out against that.
Excuse me, there are some interruptions, and I would ask that we not interrupt and we allow everybody to complete in a timely basis their comments.
There are criminals that feel comfortable in Portland, and I don't know why. I've been doing my research. There's a lot of things that go into it, but one of the things is that that people aren't talking about it. They feel comfortable. They feel like they will not be exposed. There are politicians that are not talking about it enough. They aren't building a team. There should be a press conference to talk about it. There should be a team that is put together to take care of the problem. We're talking about innocent boys and innocent girls in Portland disappearing from the streets. And I understand, like, as a politician, it's not good to bring light to that, but I believe that as a leader of the community, it is your job to make sure that the public understands what's going on. And like I said about Terry Bean, as we all know, he's having sex with little boys, and you have to disconnect yourself from him. There are several pictures of Mayor Wheeler with him. Several people have accepted money from him, and there needs to be a public statement to say that the city of Portland stands against pedophilia. They stand against human trafficking and sex slavery. It is a big problem. And people say, you know, people are mad that I'm coming from Washington, I'm coming into Portland, but these are people that are being taken up and down the I-5 corridor. It's a huge problem. And it's in my hope that I can reach through one of you today to get to your heart, to help you understand that this is something that has to be taken care of. And I just hope and I pray that someone can step up. You bring a light to a problem, people will come in with the solution. And it's something that I truly believe. That's all I got to say. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Gibson, you're obviously new to Portland because we actually do have a task force and have been working on this issue since 2008. I agree it's a serious problem. The council dedicates a significant amount of money to it.
It's not working.
Your time has expired. Next person.
Item 210, request of David Keefe Davis to address council regarding city-sponsored political terrorism.
See you, fascist!
Time's burning, Mr. Davis.
Okay, my name is David Keefe Davis. I'm from Multnomah County Cop Watch, and I'm here to address a few issues about stuff like Nick Fish and his policy advisor getting
Mr.
a
Davis,
stalking order.
I want to reiterate that we do not tolerate attacks on city employees
This isn't
in this chamber.
attack. This is actually a fact. His employee got a stalking order put on me after he accused me of being a sex offender. And then I said, there's a whole nother way we could handle this, and it's called a boxing gym, and it's perfectly legal. So his policy advisor went out and got a stalking order put on me. And that's the reason you haven't seen me in City Hall. And actually, the last time I went to council chambers, I was arrested for stalking. And then I was convicted of stalking. And then you have Chief Outlaw, who's getting stalking orders put on cop watchers, who ask a couple questions, 2 contacts, 2 interviews, 1 in uniform, 1 out of uniform, which doesn't meet the criteria of actual stalking because you need 2 unwanted contacts. And the 1 contact was when she was in uniform next to Dante James.
Mr. Davis, we are not trial judges here, but this went before a trial judge.
Can you stop interrupting me?
And the trial judge made that decision,
I don't
not
care.
the police
I don't
chief.
care about rigged systems and corrupt judges and how you guys all have them in your pocket. And you know, one thing I will say about you, Ted Wheeler, is I'm glad you haven't accepted any money from Terry Bean since like 2010, is it, right? But Nick Fish, he accepted money from child rapists since the 70s. Terry Bean, what was it, in 1/31/2018, just a couple months ago? And this is the type of stuff that you guys are trying to stop, people like me talking about this. And I had to go to the auditor's office today to get special clearance so Nick Fish's senior policy advisor wouldn't come out and stalk me. Like the last time I was here, G4S security went in to Nick Fish's office, alerted James Dunphy that I'm in the building, and then James Dunphy came out with his camera and chased me away because he's pulling a illegal stalking thing on me.
Again, the judge agreed with him and
I don't
disagreed
care about
with you.
the corrupt
well, the rest
system,
of us do.
And you talked over me for at least 30 minutes or 30 seconds, so maybe I should be allowed an extra 30
your time
seconds.
has expired, and if you're wondering why I have little sympathy for you, I want to remind you why. A year ago, you stood in the middle of Madison Street blocking traffic, and you threatened my then 10-year-old daughter and my wife. So if you're looking to me for sympathy, Mr. Davis, you're looking at the wrong guy. Thank you for being here.
All I said was,
Has any item been pulled from the consent agenda?
to go to your house.
Nothing has been pulled.
Please call the roll.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The consent agenda is adopted. First time certain item number 211, please.
Proclaim March 2018 to be Women's History Month in Portland.
So, colleagues, this is a proclamation in support of Women's History Month, and I have a proclamation that it is my great honor to read, and I appreciate everybody who is here for this uplifting opportunity. Whereas this community's greatness and success is a direct result of welcoming and empowering all people, regardless of gender, culture, class, age, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and disability. Whereas women, especially women of color, have been underrepresented, oppressed, and often unrecorded in their contributions. Yet women have been present in untold or oral histories and continue to play important roles in furthering knowledge and leading equitable change for society. And whereas, to foster the next generation of women, the City of Portland seeks to encourage and support professional, educational, and social opportunities for women, where women will not compete with one another over scarce seats at the table. Rather, when there is an inclusive space for all women to participate and commitment to draw in women of color, women are empowered to lead and benefit entire communities. Whereas Women's History Month is a time for all Portlanders to celebrate the paid and unpaid hard work of women who improve the livability of the city, working both inside and outside of the home. And whereas during Women's History Month, all people are encouraged to reflect on past victories and struggles of all women to create a society where the next generation's success is based on the content of their character, not determined by their culture or gender. And whereas the 2018 National Women's History Month theme is "Nevertheless, She Persisted." And whereas in Portland, the Women's History Month theme is "Nevertheless, We Persist," which demonstrates a more timely, inclusive vision for women, transgender women, and gender nonconforming individuals. And now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim March 1st to March 31st, 2018 to be Women's History Month in Portland and encourage all residents to observe this month. It is now my honor to bring up a panel of speakers. We have Michelle Hansman, Janine Gates, and Tiffany Penson. And Michelle, it's my understanding you're going to open us up today. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and members of City Council. My name is Michelle Hansman, and I am a Constituent Services Specialist focusing on Portland Parks and Recreation within Commissioner Amanda Fritz's office. As a passionate feminist, I am proud to serve on the Women's Empowerment Leadership Team, and am pleased to provide this introduction for our panel of speakers this morning. The National Women's History Month theme is "Nevertheless, She Persisted," a quote adopted by the feminist movement in the United States, derived from the instance in 2017 when Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell attempted to silence Senator Elizabeth Warren's objections to the confirmation of Senator Jeff Sessions as U.S. Attorney General. In Portland, the Women's Empowerment Group has decided to declare the theme for Women's History Month to be "Nevertheless, We Persist," honoring women who fight all forms of discrimination against women. Rather than recognize an instance of a prominent female politician being publicly shamed, we wanted an inclusive theme to celebrate moments when all women, transgender women, and gender nonconforming individuals fight forms of discrimination against women. The mission of women's empowerment, referred to as WE, is to empower and inspire all women within the City of Portland workforce in a supportive, non-judgmental way. Our vision is to create equity in the City of Portland, leading with the elimination of disparities affecting all who identify as women in city workforce. We is a diverse and empowered employees of Portland, referred to as DEEP, affinity group of 207 members and growing. The WE leadership team includes 4 women whose dedication, drive, energy, and enthusiasm make our events possible. The women on the leadership team are Francesca Petricolo, Natalie Luttrell, Sarah Brenner, and myself. We work hard to create quarterly educational and social events for our members. We appreciate the financial support from DEEP and our members for their support and attendance at our events. Without further ado, 4 amazing women who work for the City of Portland are here to share their stories of persistence.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today and for celebrating Women's History Month. I am Janine Gates and also a Constituent Services Specialist in Commissioner Fritz's office. I serve on the DEEP Executive Committee, and I'm a member of DEEP Affinity Groups, City African American Network, and Women Empowerment. Today, I plan to discuss a few of my experiences as a Black woman navigating our political systems. Growing up, I wasn't involved in politics. I didn't see a need or have anything to politically advocate for until my foster mother grew extremely tired of hearing my sister and I complain about the Oregon's foster care system and encouraged us to advocate for our needs. At 14 years old, I joined Oregon's first foster care youth advisory with the Oregon Department of Human Services. After becoming involved in foster care focused policies and initiatives, I was introduced to Commissioner Saltzman and other elected officials. My interactions with Commissioner Saltzman and volunteering to establish Bridge Meadows, which is an intergenerational living community where youth formerly in foster care, their adopted parents, and elders build a permanent community, introduced me to a power I did not know I had. Advocating for children and ensuring their needs were met was the biggest motivation I needed to continue my path as a political activist. I knew I was making a difference. While in college, I interned in Commissioner Saltzman's office and learned firsthand about our city's political environment. After my first summer internship in Commissioner Saltzman's office, I knew I wanted to run for office. I remember telling my 18-year-old self, I can do Dan's job. Currently, I am working hard to join Portland City's Council and appreciate my trainings with Emerge Oregon, where I can learn what it takes to successfully operate a campaign and meet other women who are interested in running for office. I look forward to joining you all one day. Reasons I would like to run for office is because I believe in the importance of diversity, whether it is one's age, culture, lived and work experiences, or sexual orientation. As well as I am passionate about East Portland, transportation, planning, and living in a city that welcomes, inspires, and uplifts all individuals. Lastly, I would like to thank Commissioner Fritz for supporting my professional development, participation on DEEP, and allowing me to sit at tables where Black women are not seen. I appreciate your support, Commissioner.
Thank you.
That was really good. Thank you. You can tell I'm kind of the eldest. I'm looking at them.
Wondering, is there an announcement to be made here?
No announcement.
We'll be collecting checks during the break.
I got excited. Hello, Mayor and members of Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Tiffany Penson, and I grew up in Northeast Portland. My father, Big John, owned a barbershop called the House of Style on Union Avenue, where many of the Black community members, musicians, professional athletes got the best haircuts and processes in town. His barbershop was so hot that even Robert Kennedy visited during his campaign trail in 1968. It was truly a community. I remember how my father used to help families, making sure kids had the things that they needed for school, holidays, food. While my home life consisted of my community and people that looked like me, I spent my years in schools like OMSI, Catlin Gable, St. Mary's Cathedral, Lincoln High School, University of Oregon, exposed to privilege and people that didn't look like me. It's funny how the mere crossing of a bridge can expose you to a different world of education, experiences, and opportunities, all of which I am grateful for. But I know clearly that the same exposure was not accessible to other members in my community. Walking in both worlds has contributed to my work at the city and has been helpful in providing opportunities for people of color and historically underserved communities. Through my work with Mayor Adams' education team developing Summer Youth Connect program, managing the Summer Works program currently housed in Mayor Wheeler's office, managing the Minority Evaluator program that invites community members to serve on panels and award contracts, and serving as a supplier diversity officer charged with identifying minority and women-owned small businesses, connecting them to contracting opportunities at the city. I know the city is headed in the right direction. I believe the city has made some strides in our social equity contracting initiatives. However, there's a lot more to do. My wish list to share with you to enhance these efforts looks like this: a new disparity study, so that the city can move from aspirational minority and women contracting goals to hard contracting goals in identified areas. Examining the processes and requirements to do business with the city. to ensure that they aren't seen as roadblocks that negatively impact our small businesses, and make the contracting and how to do business outreach trainings offered mandatory for project managers that manage the city's projects to ensure that our staff have the tools to set their projects up for success and meet the social equity expectations. I am grateful for my time and experience at the City of Portland, but I would be remiss not to mention that we still struggle with including the voices of the communities that are most impacted early on in the processes and the decisions we make. We need not worry so much about making sure things are done in a certain time frame that we forgo what is right or making good on our intentions. Authentic inclusion is essential to establishing policy that truly serves all people. Staff should feel empowered and understand that all of us are in positions to make change to better serve our communities. So I challenge us to be truly conscious as we institute change, and if you are not sure what a conscious mind looks like, always start with the population that is going to be impacted by the change. We are always a work in progress, and there is no one answer to this work. I truly believe that most of the unequitable things that happen in this world almost always comes from ignorance, and good intentions can do as much harm if they lack true understandings of the issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good morning.
Good morning, mayors and commissioners. Thank you for having me here today. For the record, my name is Betsy Kitagwa, and I'm a constituent services specialist at Commissioner Nick Fish's office. I've been working for Commissioner Fish since I was 19 years old, but started as an intern for the City Bureau of Environmental Services. Believe it or not, this is my first time testifying today, and the adrenaline is...
Suspend the rules.
I'm proud to say that I'm also a 2017 alumna for the Center for Women's Leadership, New Leadership Oregon summer program, and I currently serve on their alumni committee. I study mechanical engineering at Portland Community College, and I hope to transfer to Portland State University within the next year. Being not only a woman, but a woman of color in a white male society has shaped and impacted me the way I am today. In many of my engineering classes, starting in high school, I'm regularly the only representation for women. You'd think I'd be used to it now, but I still often question where all the women are in this field. Because of this, I found myself putting on a mask and trying to be one of the guys. I remained quiet during lectures and also found myself doing tons of homework problems alone when it was advised to be completed in groups. According to Society of Women Engineers, SWE, 20% of engineering graduates are women. For decades, engineering educators have focused on curriculum reform, promoting girls' interest in math and science to attract more women to the field. While these efforts brought in women to study engineering, the problem is that many quit during and after school. Approximately 1 in 4 women leave the engineering profession within the first 5 years, a rate much higher than our counterparts. One often reasoning behind it's because of the masculinity culture in engineering. I too often have questioned and considered to quit my studies of engineering to pursue a career that was more fitting, whatever that means. The biggest problem I had was self-doubt and lack of confidence. But because of my participation at recent events, leadership trainings, numerous workshops, and the support of amazing women, the only problem I have now is patience. Patience with discrimination and a society that sits put with oppression. Change is coming, and I do believe that Portland is inclusively heading in the right direction because our leaders, you all, are aware of the lack of representation of women. In 2015, the Portland Water Bureau hired their first female chief engineer, and that's a big win for us. I take it personally and don't doubt there will be more opportunities such as this one. I do not have the statistics for the city of Portland, but I've been here long enough to examine the increasing numbers of women hires, especially women of color in leadership and STEM positions. The women and I testifying today are part of the next generation of leaders. We are the future chief engineers, scientists, elected officials, you name it. So I ask council today for more opportunities for us and for women, whether it's mentorship opportunities, better equipped leadership trainings, I ask for more opportunities. Now I'm going to end with one of my favorite quotes. It comes from writer and filmmaker Nora Ephron, and I like to direct this to all the women listening. Whatever you choose, however many roads you travel, I hope that you choose not to be a lady. I hope you will find some way to break the rules and make a little trouble out there. And I also hope that you would choose to make some of that trouble on behalf of women. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Betsy.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'm Ashley Jaden, a native Oregonian. I work for the Water Bureau and I specialize in equitable outreach. I'm proudly here with the support of my manager, Eddie Campbell, and Dee. We persist against all discrimination. This theme speaks to me on a personal level. My dad's family is from Indonesia, my grandfather a child soldier. My grandparents were swept up in the Crossfire War and interned because of their ethnicity. In a camp lacking human rights, enough food, clean water, and safe shelter, my grandmother had her children. My grandparents met unspoken horrors and trauma, but when they came to the United States as refugees, our city made space just for them. Persisting has become difficult lately. I know I'm not alone, but 2017 was a rough year. Our 45th brought the acceleration of vicious language and acts of hatred. We all have our migration story. Some Portlanders came here by land bridge. Some council members' families and ancestors came here on the Oregon Trail. People have always moved towards something better. Just as the city welcomed your family and mine, I'm proud that we, the city of Portland, welcome immigrants and refugees, and we are a sanctuary city. As we greet our new Portlanders, let's ask ourselves, what kind of city do we want to live in? Imagine Portland in 20 years. Are there people of color in leadership? How did they get there? Are we fighting discrimination of all kinds? Recently, Michelle Obama said of young women, they're tired of watching us do the same old things and expect different results. The city strives towards equity. My colleague, Jamila Meeks of the Water Bureau's North Interstate facility planned a Women's Month TED Talk in the late afternoon. When I questioned, not over lunch, she replied, no mistake, that's when field crews return. Jamila's simple idea, an event beyond downtown in the late afternoon, made Women's History Month more accessible to our field and construction crews. We must cultivate women of color. At last year's proclamation, I learned from Nan Stark that women make 79 cents to the dollar of men. Data now shows that Latina women make 54 cents to the dollar of white men. Public or private, no matter the workplace, the lived experience is different for women of color, gender nonconforming women, and mothers. We need culturally competent women leaders. Data shows us there are fewer women of color in management despite being just as capable. Luckily, I found Corbett White at the Water Bureau. She models hard work ethic, political savvy, strong communication, and a successful career. Young women like myself need women like Corbett to demonstrate the way. Mayor Wheeler and Council, I applaud your support to hire women of color to lead the city, and our community has noticed your actions as well. Going back to my family, we always have extra food at the table and extra seats. We support others the way this city made room for us. You see, the children of immigrants feel pressure to prove that their parents' struggle was worth it. As I've said before, I am, as you are, our ancestors' wildest dreams. I thank you for the privilege to speak before you today.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
Go back to Michelle.
We are proud to announce a full calendar of events this month, and we encourage you all to attend. A few activities include the annual Wonder Woman Awards, panel discussions on topics including women in leadership and women of color, a women's clothing swap, a Dress for Success clothing drive, a book discussion, women's strength, self-defense classes, social hours, film, yoga, and art classes. We invite all council members to participate in events and show your support. You can visit our website at portlandoregon.gov/deep/we for the full list of events, and I would be happy to send that link to you. Thank you for listening to what we shared today. We welcome your comments and questions.
Excellent, thanks. Colleagues? Commissioner Fish?
Mayor, thank you for bringing this proclamation forward. I want to congratulate all the women leaders who testified this morning and who work for the city and do such great work. I want to just, on this occasion, acknowledge a few other people. I'd like to acknowledge my wife, who's the first professor of women's history at Portland State University. Awesome. And so she broke through a certain barrier. I want to thank and acknowledge my 25-year-old daughter, who is a leader in her own right and making her way in a very challenging world. I want to thank the 3 women that I have the privilege of serving with, Amanda, Chloe, and Mary. 3 of the 6 elected offices at the City of Portland are now occupied by women. That could change in the next year, and we're very fortunate to have such great role models in our community. I want to thank my Chief of Staff, Sonia Schmansky, who, without whose leadership I would be completely lost. And I would like to thank the 4 women of color who serve on my staff, Mariana, Asena, Amira, and Betsy. I think Betsy did a beautiful job speaking for young women generally who work at the city. And Betsy, if that was your first foray into testifying before City Council, I think you set the bar very high. Those were beautiful remarks, and we're very proud of you in my office. And we hope as you make your way and get your degree in engineering, we hope you'll look at the city as a first choice employer. So thank you, Mayor. Thank you for highlighting this, and it's an honor to be part of this celebration.
Commissioner Saltzman.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody. This was probably the best proclamation presentation I've seen in 20 years of City Council. Very powerful testimony. I want to thank Tiffany, Janine, Betsy, sorry, I forgot your name. Ashley, Michelle, for doing such an outstanding job and really, really telling it like it is. And that the struggle still continues. And, coming from the engineering profession myself, I fully identify with everything you say, Betsy, and I want to see it change as much as you do. Yeah. And Janine, you make me very proud to have been your boss at one time, and for the recognition that at age 18 you could do my job probably better than I could. And I know you'll get there with my help and support all along the way. And you've always been an important voice for children in foster care too. And you can talk about all the negative statistics in the world that foster kids face, and they are daunting, particularly going to college. Fewer than 1 in 5 actually go to college like Janine did and graduate. And I know she has higher aspirations, both educationally and in public service, and I want to see all of those come to fruition. But thank you all.
Commissioner Fritz.
So I greatly appreciate the 6 women on my staff, 2 of whom presented today. Thank you very much for representing us all. I do look forward to the day when we won't need a Women's History Month or a Men's History Month or a Black History Month, but rather that there would be just equity throughout our community and that we wouldn't have to celebrate. And yeah, it's good to celebrate too. I do want to note that there are twice as many women running for Congress this year compared with 2016. Over 500 women are nationwide or running for public office in the midterms. We only have 20% of the seats in Congress. And for a long time, for my generation, it was like, well, in my lifetime, it's not going to get to parity. But with your example, I think maybe we will.
Yes, you do.
Thanks for sharing your stories. It's great to learn personal details about people we see in the hallways every day, and I think it helps humanize all of us. And I will never get over the fact, I've said it many times, I'm only the 8th woman to be elected to Portland City Council. Commissioner Fritz is the 7th, and I hope that every election year you see that number tick up. So, and maybe one of those numbers will be Janine.
I'd just like to thank you for the presentation. I thought it was great. It was very informative. Tiffany, you'd mentioned a couple of very specific items that I'd like to pursue. Offline, you had suggested a call for a new diversity study and some shoring up of our procurement strategies. I think we have an interesting opportunity here, given that we're doing a search for the Director of the Office of Equity and Diversity, and I think these two questions are neatly intertwined. And so I think the timing is excellent for us to have that conversation, and I'd like to do that prior to the budget process getting too much farther along, if we could do that. And I just want to say, you know, when I went out to hire my leadership team in the mayor's office, I had one criteria, and the criteria was I wanted the best people I could get to work for us. And as luck would have it, we have more than half of our leadership team in the mayor's office are women, and of the women, 3/4 are women of color. And so I think that is a view to what the future holds in terms of leadership in this city. And I want to thank everybody who is involved on my team, but everybody really throughout the city of Portland who works so hard. And I'm glad that we do have this opportunity to acknowledge that impressive body of work. So thank you all for being here. If you don't mind, the City Council would love to have a photo with all of you right up here in front, if that's all right. Betsy, since you are our newest testifier, could I give this to you and now this for us? Thank you. We got to start all over. Got it? All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right, colleagues, we are now moving on to item number 212.
Appeal on behalf of the Pearl District Neighborhood Association against Design Commission's decision of approval for design review with modifications and concurrent greenway review for the Fremont Apartments, a 17-story mixed-use building at 1650 Northwest Nato Parkway, LU 16-278-621-DZM-GW.
Very good. And at this point, I'd like to turn this over to legal counsel, who will walk us through the procedures for today.
Sure. So we had a hearing on this a few weeks ago, and since that time, there was an open record period through February 28th that closed at 5 p.m. A number of pieces of testimony and evidence were received during that time. There was a second time period ending March 6th, yesterday at 5 p.m. for rebuttal. During that time, there were 3 submissions, one from the applicant's attorney, one from the appellant's attorney. A third submittal was copies of 5 books and a letter describing that book. It's pretty clear that a book is new evidence, and so counsel may not consider or must reject that and not include that in the record, and any portions of the letter that pertain to new evidence also need to be not considered in counsel's decision. Today, there are a couple of procedural things before we can begin deliberation, which is council expressed that they were not going to take testimony but merely wanted to deliberate today. Commissioner Fritz was not here at the last hearing, and so I think she's going to represent on the record that she has reviewed the record and is prepared to participate today. And then the mayor needs to run through the conflict of interest ex parte language. So I think
very good. Commissioner Fritz, did you want to start?
Yeah, I wanted to first thank the Council Clerk, Carla Morlove, for getting the video of the proceedings posted within a day or two of the hearing. That was really helpful. Couldn't quite figure out how to get the link download, so I actually taped it onto my iPad so that I could watch it on the plane on the way back from visiting my mother in England. So that's by far the most interesting or unusual way that I have reviewed the record since in the 10 years I've been on the council. But I did review the entire written record, or the council documents as well as that. I don't have any ex parte contacts to report. My staff did not meet with any of the parties, and neither did I. I have had discussions with Commissioner Fish and Mayor Wheeler since I got back on the procedural grounds of this appeal.
So Commissioner Fritz is declaring an ex parte contact. Does anybody have any questions about that with her? Terrible English, geez. Very good. Do any members, other members of the council wish to declare ex parte contacts? I do. Commissioner Fritz and I had a conversation about the procedure of this hearing. Does anybody have any questions of me about that? Very good. Does any other council member have any ex parte contacts that they'd like to disclose? Has any member of the council visited the site since our last meeting? No member of the council has visited the site. Do any members of the council have any other matters that need to be discussed before we begin today's proceedings? No member of the council does. So with that, we will continue. So legal counsel, could you lay out then the question before us today?
So you have an appeal that you had been presented a slide as part of the PowerPoint presentation that laid out your options, which is you may approve the appeal, which would result in denying the application. You could deny the appeal and approve the application with the conditions that were approved by the Design Commission. You could also deny the appeal and approve the application with additional conditions. I believe staff could confirm those were the only options on the table.
Very good. Colleagues, any thoughts?
Do you want us to dive into the discussion now?
Let's dive in. Commissioner Fritz.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the council letting me go first because I didn't have the opportunity to ask any questions last time, although I would have to say that you all asked the questions that I would have asked, in particular Commissioner Udaley's questions at the end regarding the modifications. I think she very clearly ran down all of the things that were being asked to be changed from the development standards. Commissioner Fish identified the pinch point on the Greenway as a significant concern. So at the outset, I want to be clear that I don't consider the view from the Fields Park to be at all germane to this discussion. There isn't a scenic or a view corridor from Fields Park that was identified, nor is there an amendment on that at the Central City 2035 plan that we're going to be discussing this afternoon. The view corridor along Northwest 12th is being maintained. And so I think from the piece about the view from Fields Park is really not at all germane to the discussion. What is of concern to me is the development itself and the Greenway, because the Greenway is the significant public benefit that's involved in this site. So I learned on reviewing the record, particularly the Design Commission's decision, that there is a partition that's currently, so that it's a larger site that is currently being divided. That's not germane to this particular question either, because we have to make our decision based on are the approval criteria met or are they not met. So, but the fact that there's so many modifications being asked, particularly on things like setbacks and landscaping, when there is in fact a bigger property that there's no need to have a 2-foot setback rather than a 5-foot setback, that's one of the things. I've actually handed out to council and to the council clerk and the city attorney. I've gone through the findings and the the decision. And the pieces that are really concerning to me, as I said, were what Commissioner, I think everybody was given this. Did you get by your staff? I've got a couple of extra copies here. Looks like everybody else is. Good, we've got enough. So the height, the rooftop mechanical equipment going up, yes, it's allowed to, but it's also larger than is standard, than the 10%. It's going to be 73%. So there's no reason why there couldn't be a floor lower and get within the standards. The bicycle parking being spaced at 1 foot 4 inches rather than 2 foot 6 inches. There's a reason we have these standards. I actually went out and measured the Bike Town bikes, and their handlebars are approximately 1 foot 11 inches wide. So how you would be able, and they are somewhat clunky bikes, but they're not unusually clunky bikes. So it just seems to me that bikes are not going to fit, or it's going to be very difficult to maneuver them into a space of 1 foot 4 inches. And then to hang them vertically, that in itself is challenging, especially for somebody like me who might be able to ride the bike, but in order to lift it up is going to need a little bit more maneuvering room. The really important ones, the length of the facades above 100 feet to exceeding 120 feet in length, that's important. Allowing 50% of the plaza area on the north side to be covered by shadows at noon. It's 84% will be in shadow, and the Design Commission's decision says, oh, but at 1 o'clock, it's only going to be 70-something, or I forget what the percentage was, but that's not what the standard is. The standard is 50% at noon, and so 84% of the plaza being in shadow at noon is problematic. The setbacks, there's a diagram in the record of the diagonal, which is in the current code, that is required for the portions of the building over 35 feet in height to extend, are not allowed to extend into the setback area, and they do. And the same at the top of the building. And so that's going to mean that there's unacceptable towering over the greenway. I don't know if it is all right for me to just continue going through this list of things. Sure. The maximum building dimensions, to allow the building dimension to be 230 foot instead of 200. To allow the landscaping to be ground cover and low shrubs instead of trees. We have a tree code. We want trees to be planted. We don't want buildings to be built right up to the property line, because what we've got here is a property line that is going to be 2 feet away, and it says in the record that then the other building is going to potentially also be built right up to the property line, and that's not going to allow really any significant landscaping or maintenance of that landscaping to survive. The approval criteria for this, so the modifications, I think, all indicate that this application, this proposal, is trying to do too much on a site that's just doesn't have that capacity. It could have the capacity in a different configuration. I didn't agree with the concerns about site area, and besides which, as I said, there's a bigger site anyway, so that could be managed or conditioned. But the approval criteria for design review are, I think, not met. And I got this from the dissenting paragraph of the design commissioner who voted against the proposal. She outlined the different approval criteria for design review that she did not believe would be met. The ones that I'm particularly concerned about are A1, integrate the river, and A11, link the river to the community. The river is the main feature of this site, and to have a greenway that's only, 13 feet or something, or the pathway at the pinch point, doesn't celebrate the river. It doesn't have a project that celebrates the river and contributes to setting centres of interest and activity that focuses on the Willamette. This whole development focuses on the development rather than on the Willamette. It doesn't, A3, respect the Portland block structures. As I said, it doesn't have the 200-foot block pattern. This development is going to set a precedent, and I think it's not the precedent of height. With all due respect to the folks in the Neighbourhood Association, you and I fought that battle in the comprehensive plan. We lost. The height is going to go up, and in a future development, the heights will be even bigger than is being allowed here. But what matters to me is the greenway and the block pattern, and I think we need to, that's the precedent that is really important here. The pedestrian linkages, A31, orienting integrated open spaces and trails that physically and physically link the river and or surrounding neighborhoods. Yes, the plaza's nice, although I personally would have had it on the other side, would have made it even better. But it's the greenway that's not an integrated open space and trail that once the adjacent properties are developed with 50-foot greenways, it's going to look really pinched. And I don't know if anybody's been to the Avalon, which is in South Waterfront, where the greenway is 25 feet and there's a restaurant with an outside patio outside it. It's really unpleasant. It's unpleasant to be on the trail where you feel like you're walking through somebody's dining area. It's really, I've actually visited that, and it's unpleasant to have sweaty people running past within 4 feet of where you're trying to have a nice dinner. So I just don't think that that's the as a model of, for a 25-foot greenway with a restaurant backing onto it, that particular example doesn't work, and I don't see that this one is going to work either. Findings for A3 and A3-1, the placement of the building on the southern property line was an area of concern. Incorporating the water features. Now, this is A5-3, incorporating water features and take cues from the river, the bridges, and the historic industrial character in the design of structures and/or open space. There are no water features in this proposal other than the stormwater planters, which are fairly utilitarian. The application says that the river is the water feature. Well, if it were, then we wouldn't need this particular design guideline to say that we need additional water features. Similarly, A5-4, integrate works of art. There are no works of art other than benches, which are apparently very nice benches. But I don't think that was what was meant by having public works of art, particularly in a significant site like this. I appreciated Patricia Gardner's testimony that the Fields is supposed to be a neighborhood park. It's supposed to want the glimpse of the Fremont Bridge from the park is supposed to draw people to the greenway. Once you get there, you want a place there. And the plaza on the side isn't the place that I think is the most important. It's the greenway that's the most important. So C11, increasing river view opportunities. There's not really a particular area on the greenway that could be said to be a river viewing opportunity. And I already went into the shadow issue, but to expand, the North Pole sub-area open shadow standard is intended to allow for adequate amounts of light and air, in addition to providing opportunities for active and passive recreation, visual relief, increasing options for pedestrian circulation. So how you can say have more shadow, better meeting a standard which is requiring less shadow, I just found that quite confounding in the Design Commission's recommendation. So for these reasons, I recommend approval of the appeal.
Very good. And I just want to make clear, we could have staff come back up. Is that correct or no?
To the extent that you were to ask staff questions that elicited new evidence, you'd have to allow people to respond to that new evidence. So I would exercise
great
extreme
diligence.
Caution.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make that clear. Very good. So, and are there any other perspectives? Or Commissioner, would you like to make a motion?
Gosh. No other.
Commissioner Fish, and then Commissioner Daly.
Well, Commissioner Daly, you want to make a comment?
The only item that I have a comment on is the shade. If memory serves me, and it may not, I thought that the response was the criteria was met at 1 p.m. So the 50% at 1 p.m., but you're saying you don't think that's the case?
Well, the standard is at noon.
Yeah.
And so also when you think about it, most people are going to be out at noon wanting to enjoy a sunny spring day in April, which is when the standard again is. By 1 o'clock, a lot of people have gone back to work. So there's a reason that the standard is specific rather than just at any time of the day is there less shade.
Okay.
So that was why I'm concerned about that.
Okay. Commissioner Fish?
Well, Mayor and colleagues, you know, when we have these challenging and difficult cases, they end up being close calls. And it has been my habit during my service on the council to listen carefully to my colleagues when I have significant doubts about a matter before us. And I generally listen especially carefully to Commissioner Fritz because, after all, she previously served on the Planning Commission. And under the prior mayor, she and Mayor Hales were often the people with the deepest life experience around the issues that we were grappling with. I am particularly pleased that Commissioner Fritz began her comments today by taking height off the table. And the truth is that we had a lot of testimony in the hearing around height. But I think what we all recognize is that if this project were not going forward and were instead filed a year or two from now, under the new rules approved by the council, it could actually be a taller building. And I in fact raised that with the attorney for the appellant, who said that his clients were fully aware that was, you know, a potential consequence of one of the routes we might take. So I think we all have our eyes open, and I appreciate that Commissioner Fritz has essentially said that's not the primary focus of her analysis, and nor is it the primary focus of mine. You know, as Amanda went through the various requests for modification and the concerns that she has, and then also brought Julie Livingston, the chair, into the conversation through her the objection, the dissent that she filed, I was reminded of one of the famous lines from Watergate, when everyone kept saying, "Where's the smoking gun?" And someone famously said, "Well, the reason we can't find the smoking gun is there's so much smoke in the room." And I think what Commissioner Fritz has done in laying out her concerns is that she's made clear that there are a host of approval criteria that have not been met, that there's no single factor, but in the totality, it does not rise to the level of meeting our standard. I want to highlight specifically the Greenway. Now, I know we are not currently operating under a 50-foot Greenway standard. That is the future marker that we have established. But I encourage people that care about greenways to go look at some of the different approaches the city has invested in greenways. And for me, one of the most successful and sometimes criticized approach is the emerging greenway in South Waterfront. Not only does it have sufficient width to accommodate lots of different uses, but it actually is designed so that there are dedicated spaces for bikes and for pedestrians for purposes of safety. A lot of thought went into establishing those setbacks, and if you look at the development around it, I think you can make a very persuasive case that the fact that the buildings are set back even further enhances the experience of the neighborhood, of the residents, and of the whole feeling of the emerging neighborhood. This particular greenway to me is wholly unsatisfactory. And one of the things that got my attention when we had the graphic last time is the choke point at the southern end. And at the southern end, it narrows to a very small entry point where you sort of have to navigate between a wall and a planter. And as someone who likes to ride his bike down by the river and take advantage of those exercises, that is not a successful greenway. That is not a greenway that is contemplating accommodating multiple uses and really is, in my view, in the public interest. The final point that Commissioner Fritz makes that I think is very important, and I think it's a contextual question, is the precedent. There's going to be other development along the river. One of the things we learned last time is there was a challenge in actually identifying buildings that set the precedent for this building. And in fact, we had to cross the river to find one building, and we had to go quite a ways south to find another building. That's not going to be the case in the next 10 years because the other buildings on either side of this development are going to be built out. I think one of the questions and concerns this council should have is, to what standard? What is expected of the other development that becomes the companion development? Because of the issues that Commissioner Fritz has raised, because of my concern specifically about the Greenway and the precedent we're setting for other development along the river, I will support her motion.
Commissioner Fritz, did you put a motion on the table?
I did not, so I move to uphold the appeal and deny the application.
And I will
Commissioner
second
Fritz
it
moves. Commissioner Fish seconds.
Can I ask
The city attorney wants to say something too.
Oh, very good.
I have been requested by the applicant to at least lay on the table that they have a potential alternate design that pulls the development back further from the Greenway. They would at least like to place on the table whether council would be willing to reopen the record to allow that to be done, and would waive any 120-day deadline. Council does not need to, council has the opportunity, you have an application in front of you, you can make a decision. You have the opportunity. I don't think it would be procedural error for you to reopen the record, but I'm putting it on the table and leaving it at that.
Could I have a few more bullet points on that? Are they proposing to do that today or at a later date?
I believe what it would require is for council to continue the hearing to a later date, at which time, I mean, I think we've done this, but not necessarily when we've been in deliberations, but we've done this where we let people, go talk amongst yourself or come back with something. It would require reopening everything. So if a new design were to be put on the table, you would need to take testimony on that new design as well.
And the testimony would be limited to the new items brought to the record. Is that correct?
Yes, but I assume it would be fairly broad. I mean, people could testify about all the criteria and how the new design relates to the new criteria.
So the new design would have to not only increase the greenway, it would have to change the height, it would have to change the setbacks, it would have to change the length of the facades, it would have to change the shadowing on the greenway, on the plaza. So is the applicant proposing to come back with something that doesn't request any modifications?
It would be a different design that takes the comments they've heard into account, and I'm merely repeating what I've heard.
Wouldn't that design have to then go through design commission before we, I'm a little confused about the sequencing here.
So a new application would need to go through the design commission. This body, under the current code, does not have the opportunity to take something and remand it back to the design commission. This body has in the past considered significant changes to design, in fact has requested / demanded significant changes in design, not necessarily this commission, but in the past, which they have been willing to consider in relation to neighborhood concerns or their own concerns. But,
can I just say, as a veteran of those discussions, that it is the rare case where we allow the process to effectively bypass the citizens that we have placed in the position of advising us. We do many things well as a body, being the ad hoc planning commission, ad hoc design review commission, and the like. I think tests our limits, and it seems to me that if what they're essentially saying is they want a do-over, there's two ways we do it. We either deny the appeal, we either grant the appeal, and that is the formal way that there's a do-over, or there's a do-over and they go back and present another plan. But I would be less interested in just having a new design come to us. I would want the full commission to be able to weigh in on any changes. I think the cleaner way of approaching this, therefore, is to grant the appeal.
So I'll chime in on this as well. If we go that route that has been proposed by the applicant, and I want to acknowledge this is beyond 11th hour. This is like seconds before I think we were about to take a vote. And so it comes very, very late in the process. And I think this is exploited, or at least highlighted, maybe that's the appropriate word, a inherent flaw with the process. Because I am not eager to personally revisit a complete rework of this project without going through those other stage gates that are deliberately built into this process for a variety of important reasons. Now, that being said, if the applicant is serious, and it sounds like they are, I don't think they would have put this on the table without being serious about it, there would have to be clarity on exactly what issues we are asking them to come back and rework. And so I'd like to spend a few minutes exploring that. Commissioner Fritz has laid out what her objections to the plan as they currently exist are, and I want to find out if there is agreement with those specific objections or not agreement with those specific objections or differences of opinion. And then I believe that the way Commissioner Fish has just laid it out is exactly the right procedure for us to follow at this particular time. But I want to make sure that we are giving clarity to the applicant about what it is they are to do so that they're not engaged in an expensive and fruitless exercise. So, I'm sorry, Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor. I can certainly provide, or Linda can give you a copy to the applicant, and I can give you my copy in terms of the criteria that I don't think are met. I'm with Commissioner Fish. I've had a lot of experience in looking through approval criteria and saying, are they met, are they not met, but not in terms of is a new proposal an appropriate design or not. I mean, to chop bits off of the greenway facing front, I don't know whether that then goes against other design criteria that says you shouldn't have so much choppiness in building. I don't know if there even is a design guideline like that. So I'm with Commissioner Fish. I don't consider myself a design expert. It's kind of like I know that this doesn't get there, and I think it's really up to the applicant to figure out how to get there.
Well, I'll put a couple of values on the table. First of all, I completely do not buy any of the arguments that we've heard around views, and I want to make that crystal clear. From my perspective, testimony around views that are not protected is not persuasive to me. And given where we are with regard to the planning process, both as it exists today and as it will exist under the 2035 comprehensive plan, one should expect that there will be development along the waterfront on the water side of Fields Park. So if there is anybody here who believes that there will be protected views from the park, I want to quickly dispel people from that belief. There will be development in that area. It is designed for development, it is planned for development, and there will be development. Now the question is, what does that development look like? This is not just any block that has been considered for this location. I want to be clear, I don't think the building is a bad building. There are many design attributes that are very appealing to me and I think reflect the intentions behind design review, and I think they got it largely right in that regard. However, this location, as I say, is an iconic location, and what we do here with the first development will set the standard for the rest of the development that takes place along that corridor. And the one thing we absolutely can never take back is the location of the building in the Greenway. And it is my belief that we need to aggressively protect that Greenway throughout this process and the development of the parcels to the south of that. And I want to be very clear, the city of Portland is the owner of some of those parcels, and we will hold the city to the same standards that we are holding these private sector developers to as well. So I am persuaded that we should see what the applicant has in mind. We should give them that opportunity because they have put a lot of time and effort and money into the process up to this point. And we should see if we can get to a better project in terms of the location and the Greenway. That's my personal perspective on this.
Mayor, can I make a suggestion?
Commissioner Fish.
I think we have two paths. We can grant the appeal, or we can give them more time to come back with another design. I think it might be helpful to us to test this, what the council view is on Commissioner Fritz's motion. And if for some reason that motion fails, then I think the plan B is to discuss additional time to have them come back. But I think it's worth testing whether the council feels that procedurally it would be best to go back through the process in the ordinary course. So I would call a vote on the Fritz proposal.
Okay, we have an amendment we have a motion on the table. Call the roll.
Fritz.
We do often try to get to yes in these kinds of proceedings, and I do appreciate that the applicant chose at the beginning to have this as a de novo or not on the record appeal, so that lots of different things could have been brought in and we didn't have to spend that time arguing, is it in the record, is it not in the record? I also particularly appreciated the constructive comments from everybody at the hearing, that it was focused on the approval criteria, that there was very little naming, shaming, or assertions of malintent, and I don't think there is any. For me, the number of modifications all put together shows that this building is trying to do too much on the site area that's been identified. I would like, when it comes back, I'd like to see actual setbacks that are appropriate so that the adjacent property can also develop in a very public-oriented way. I would like to see that. Well, the height will not be such a problem, because if it comes back under the new central city plan, the height will be allowed to be higher anyway. But as Commissioner Fish and the Mayor have identified, it is all about the Greenway to me. And I don't believe that the current proposal meets the current approval criteria and the current development standards. And for that reason, I vote aye.
Fish?
I believe the council has two paths before it, both of which have merit, but because of what I see as some fundamental failings in the design of this building, because of concerns that I share with Commissioner Fritz about the approval criteria, and because of the precedential effect of our decision here, I vote aye.
Saltzman?
Well, I could probably, I could go either way. I have the concerns expressed by my colleagues about the Greenway pinch point, and also some other concerns about that Commissioner Fritz just raised. But I also tend to want to be very deferential to our design commission too. I don't want to be the design commission. So I think that's what gives me maybe the aversion to the last-minute proposal by the applicant to come back to us. It's just putting us in, it's setting us up for spending too much time micromanaging a project of this nature. So I think it's better to just reset and come back to us and come back to the Design Commission with a new application that hopefully satisfies the concerns that were expressed here today. So I vote aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Wheeler?
One more point I'd just like to put on the table. We are a growing city, and there will be more height and there will be more density. And that's not a decision I'm making, that's a decision that was made a long time ago, and it's reflected in our planning process. And we know that going forward, we're going to be living in a taller, more dense community. We're going to ensure that we are living closer to amenities, employment, schools, places of work, places of recreation, transportation options, and the like. So we cannot stop that growth, but we can manage it appropriately. And as I say, I think the development team here, the design team, got it largely right. That being said, because this is an iconic location and because this building will set the standard for that location, I want us to set that standard very high. And I believe this design team and this development team has the capacity in spades to be able to deliver a building that will meet their objectives as well as meet the community objectives and be celebrated for many, many generations to come. And so with that, I will vote with my colleagues. I vote aye, the motion carries, the appeal is approved, and the application is denied.
So before the gavel goes down, this is a tentative vote?
Yes, this is a tentative vote. We will take a final vote on, I'm looking at our amazing council clerk.
2 weeks.
How much time is
So this is going to require, is Mr. Kleinman present? Yes. Given the lack of, the planner who worked on this is out, and there is a kind of a backup of work. If we can do 3 to 4 weeks, do you think we will need, the prevailing attorney needs to provide findings to city attorney and to staff. So if we could do you have a time in 3 or 4 weeks where you have everyone?
In 3 weeks, Commissioners Fish and Daly will be out.
Why don't we try 4 then?
4, it would be 11 a.m. on Wednesday morning, April 4th.
May I make one final comment?
Commissioner Fritz.
I'd like to first of all thank Lynn Louise for your guidance throughout this hearing and on keeping us all on track. Also, Ben Nielsen, who is on pre-scheduled vacation today. I think he did a fabulous job on this. Mindy Brooks, thank you for answering, as usual, my view corridor questions. And Hillary Adam, thank you for pinch hitting. And finally, thank you to Claire Adamsick on my staff. It's been precisely 1 week since I got back from my vacation, and she was pulling things together for me at 10 o'clock last night, so I appreciate her assistance greatly.
I think it's important that we also acknowledge the Design Review Commission, because they're probably sitting there now going, what the heck? We put a lot of time and energy into this. Are we not being respected? I want to be very clear. We have tremendous respect for the Design Review Commission. And as you can see, this body maybe has the flexibility to be able to view these same complex design and planning questions, zoning questions, through a slightly different lens. So I want to be very clear to our volunteer members of that commission. This is not in any way intended as disrespect to your hard work. Your hard work has been taken into account and it has been considered, and we value that input very, very much. So thank you for your service on that. Thank you, everybody. Next item, please, is item 219.
Amend Election Reform Code to rename as Open and Accountable Elections Program and reassign from Office of Neighborhood Involvement to a Commissioner's Office.
Commissioner Daly. Oh, I'm sorry. I have, sorry.
I mean, I do have remarks, but yeah.
Okay, and
yeah.
I turn it over to Commissioner Fritz, then you, Daly. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
So this is about open and accountable elections. Open and accountable elections are obviously a foundation of our democracy. I want to thank Commissioners Daly and Fritz for working together on this to make this change. This is a great example of collaboration. I think direct oversight by Commissioner Fritz will help ensure that our election program will get the attention it needs to ensure that it is successfully implemented. Commissioner Daly.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I'm very supportive of Commissioner Fritz's efforts to decrease barriers for candidates from all walks of life to seek public service, and I actually look forward to utilizing open and accountable elections myself. It's been a pleasure to work with her office on this and also to seek inspiration from another office, Commissioner Saltzman, who pioneered the children's levy model as a unique way to run a program. When we inherited Open and Accountable along with the Office of Neighborhood Involvement, we faced a challenge of where the program could find a home where it wouldn't create a potential, even the potential of an appearance of conflict of interest if it was cited in a bureau that, for instance, was held by a commissioner that was using the program. And we finally realized, after trying to find a variety of homes, that it could move, like the children's levy is capable of doing. So thank you, Commissioner Saltzman. And now I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, colleague. The purpose of this ordinance is to change who is responsible for oversight of the Open and Accountable Elections Program, which is particularly dear to my heart, and I have to take this opportunity to thank Mayor Hales and Commissioner Novick for voting for it as one of the last things that they did before they left office. That is indeed a legacy that will, I hope, bear fruit for empowerment of everybody to run for office. It's a coincidence, but a happy coincidence, that it happened to be the day when we had the discussion of Women's History Month and the need for more candidates of color, candidates who are women or identify as women, candidates of all kinds, to be able to run without having anybody question, where did you get your money from? So when we passed this in December of 2016, the auditor declined to have the program in her office, and we chose to put it in the Office of Neighborhood Involvement. And I'm very happy that we are now revising that plan and have a good way to move forward. I turn it over to my Chief of Staff, Tim Crail, who with Christina Nieves was one of the architects of the program.
Well, if I can put a question on the table for Tim or whoever to answer. I guess, on its surface, when you read this, it doesn't sound like it's removing conflict of interest. You're taking a program that's in a bureau, which is at least an arm's length relationship with a commissioner in charge, and you're giving it to a commissioner. And so explain to me how that's not creating...
We were just about to do that, sir.
Okay,
I will do so.
Explain the perception issues and that this is making it, less of an arm's length relationship.
Yeah. My name is Tim Crail, Mayor, Commissioners. First, I just want to say I'm really glad I did not have to immediately follow the women presenters this morning. Michelle and Janine and Betsy were amazing, along with the others, but those are the ones I know best. And so having that little space removed, is a nice opportunity to reset the bar. As it's already been stated, this was passed by council in December 2016. At the time, we had spent about a year putting the program together, working with the community, having public forums in the community to get input on what the program should look like. As a reminder, it's a grants program based on money that you raise. It's not like the previous system the city had, which was a system where, that was a grant system. This is a matching fund system. So you have to raise money to get additional funds based on what you were able to raise using the criteria set by the program. At the time, our desire was to place it in the auditor's office. The auditor, as an independent elected official, declined to have it in her office. And so we were looking at other options. We talked to the community. We looked at various options throughout the city. And at that time, Commissioner Fritz was in charge of the Office of Neighborhood Involvement, asked the then director if she was willing to take the program on. She said yes. And so that's what we passed at the time. It was not ideal, but it was what we could do at that time. In 2017, a new commissioner was put in charge of ONI, a new director was hired, and their priorities were different. And so we at the council asked the office or the city budget office to do an analysis of options and staffing needs for the program. That was completed in the fall. And again, they concluded the best place would be the auditor's office, but that was, again, not an option. We looked at other options. Working with Commissioner Daly's office, we determined that having a commissioner oversee the program as much arm's length as possible, knowing that there's still supervisory responsibility, is the direction we decided to go, since there were really no other options that presented themselves at this time. And believe me, we looked at pretty much every bureau in the city as, could we put it in transportation? No, we didn't look at that one, but we looked at many others. So this ordinance moves it to a commissioner's office. And what we've done is, if you look at the last provision in the code, 2.16.190, it directs that the mayor will assign this program to a commissioner. And it further states that the mayor will only assign it to a commissioner who's not in the final 2 years of their term. We recognize that there is a potential conflict of interest, but by allowing it for a person to be running the program at the same time would be a greater conflict. And so this requires that a commissioner who is not facing re-election would be responsible for oversight of the program.
So in other words, it mandates that it'll change every 2 years.
Right.
Regardless of whether the commissioner in charge has declared
Correct.
for re-election. So Commissioner Fritz, you're up in 2 years, so you're going to have this bureau till December?
Correct.
And then the mayor's going to reassign it to somebody who's not in the next election cycle?
That is the way the code is written, yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Fish is now looking kind of aghast, and so it would be either positions 2 or 3, since they're not up next 2 years.
Our goal is to make this as independent as possible. We have been talking with Human Resources and others, and we are not going to design it the same way as the Children's Levy, in that these will not be staff representative positions. They will be civil service protected positions. Initially, we're starting with 1, and then that person will be involved in creating the job description and hiring a second person. And so our goal at this point is for it to be a 2-person operation. And it will be, we're still working with HR on what the job description is going to be and what the classification is going to be, but it will be civil service protected, so it will not be an at-will position in a commissioner's office.
And did you say it will be a two-person office? Is that?
Yes.
Did I hear you? Okay. Yeah.
Tim, if it is likely to rotate to another office, how do you intend to engage the council in the hiring process?
I wasn't planning to engage you at all, Commissioner Fish, but if you would like to be, I would be happy to do so.
Well, I'm just, this is a kind of a hybrid. This is not, as you say, what you've made clear is this is not the equivalent of us hiring our at-will City Hall staff. This is like hiring almost like a mini bureau that we know is going to be portable. In a sense, it's a little different than the children's levy, which throughout the entire time we've had it has been run out of one commissioner's office. And so he's had the primary role in selecting and overseeing things like staff and support. So
we would be happy to include any representatives from any of the council offices that want to be involved in the hiring process.
Yeah, I think that would be good, and good, thank you.
I think that covers what I had to say, so if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
So I just have a comment, because I'm hearing exactly what Commissioner Saltzman is asking, and I, of course, had exactly the same questions about the relationship between this being in an elected's office where the elected themselves will be subject to that program. And I think we all agree that's not a perfect solution. And so I am hoping that one of two things happens in the long term. In the short term, I'm supporting this because the program has to go somewhere. I hope it goes to the auditor. And I know the auditor does not want it, but the auditor is really where this belongs in terms of independence and accountability. And I'm not saying that to in any way disrespect the auditor. I have heard her, and I know she does not want it, and we are not giving it to her today. But I hope that as this pilot program unfolds and the operation gains credibility, perhaps her resistance will be lowered in years ahead. If that is not an option, then I think we should also start planning for an external independent operation that has nothing to do with the Portland City Council. But long-term, I don't think it is a good solution or an accountable solution to have it be part of the political offices. That's too close.
I agree with you completely, Mayor. And my hope is that once we get the position hired and the admin rules written and the forms created and it's up and running, that it will be viewed as something that's not a great burden and will not be a great demand on any individual's time, and will be able to be at that point placed in a more appropriate home. I'm happy that we will be able to do the implementation and the hiring, because I think that we, as the original sponsors of it, we know what the goals are, and I believe we're in a place that we can get that up and running. And once it's up and running, I'm hopeful that somebody will step up at that point and say, I'm happy to take it on at this point because I can see what the level of work is.
Exactly. Commissioner Udaly?
I just wanted to add that we also explored citing the program at the county elections office, and they also were not interested, but that is a potential plan B. And I just want to say that our giving this program back to Commissioner Fritz's office is not a matter of my office or my bureau having different priorities. I had to have many conversations with my chief of staff about giving this up because he's dedicated to this idea and to breaking down barriers of participation. But we just realized, given what we have on our plate, we didn't have, when we couldn't find a home, we really didn't have the capacity to move it forward. And we also realized that we could give it back to Commissioner Fritz, and it's her brainchild, and I'm excited to see her move forward with it.
Mayor, can I add a comment?
Commissioner Fish.
So I think that this has been framed exactly right. Commissioner Fritz is, in essence, the champion for this program, and I have a lot of confidence in her and her office in launching it and doing the preparatory work for this to be a successful system. I also think that it behooves us to take another run at finding a neutral third party to administer it. I don't even want to think about the kinds of issues that could come up if it's being run out of a city hall office and a city commissioner has endorsed someone in a race, a staff member has endorsed someone in a race. There's issues that come up that political issues that create the appearance of tilting one way or another. I mean, there's a whole host of things, and I think it would behoove us to take another run at looking at a strictly neutral party to administer it. And you've already said that would be optimal. And I think it's encouraging that the mayor has said that he'll make another run at that. And I think that's wise policy.
So I guess, I'm hearing everybody and agreeing it's a less than perfect solution, yes, but it may be a solution that works for some sort of interim. Right. I guess I want to add an amendment, though, that and I'd like the attorney to weigh in on this, but that any communications, because, we're all colleagues and we talk all the time, and so it's possible that the commissioner in charge of the open and accountable elections could be a very good friend of a commissioner who's up for election and may want to somehow have their views known to the commissioner in charge. So I would like to make any communications about the Open and Accountable Elections Act a ex parte communication among commissioners and subject to being declared. Is that possible? Legal?
I don't even know what you're asking me, Commissioner.
That you should not be discussing how you're running the office, or whoever's in charge of that office should have no discussions with a commissioner who is up in the election cycle.
Well, that's at odds with what Commissioner Fish just said in terms of how we are going to hire the staff and stuff, and that it's going to be an all-council decision.
Well, that's true. It is. I guess I didn't hear that part.
And there will also be extensive follow-up conversations from staff telling people who may very well be colleagues that their filing is inadequate, or there's additional information that has to be provided, or that there's rules that have to be observed. So I think it may be well-intentioned, Dan, but I think we're getting into an area where we'd be parsing out speech and communication. I think we've landed at a better place, frankly, which is this is the proper office to handle the establishment of the program and to get us to a point where the council can then take another run at finding a neutral third party to administer it. I think we're all in agreement on that, and I don't think we need an amendment to that effect.
And Dan, this is the 10th year I've worked with you. You know that I always have monthly meetings. I bring you up to date with everything that I'm doing. I share the same information with each of my colleagues. I don't anticipate this being any different for the next 9 months.
And I'm not pointing a finger at you, but I'm just saying this arrangement we're doing with a commissioner in charge running this. I mean, it's not going to be you after December. So it's just subject to, I think, discussions that perhaps ought not to be occurred or ought not to occur without some standard of declaration.
By the way, all the communications other than oral communications would be subject to public records laws. So now we're talking about any conversation about how's the program going, do you have adequate staff, what's been your sense about its success, and I would hate to be the police on those kinds of questions. I leave it to the...
Not the police, just those that are subject to disclosure, is what I'm saying.
Commissioner Selson,
disclosure when?
And to whom?
Yeah.
Commissioner Selson, one thing
I guess maybe upon challenge by anybody.
One thing we could do that might help allay your concerns is to bring the admin rules back to council for review before adopting any admin rules.
Yeah, that's the answer.
Because that's going to be sort of guiding how the program is implemented. Because once the program is once the admin rules are written, that's going to guide how the program is going to be run.
Tim, that's a smart suggestion.
Well, we'd want to do that anyway,
yeah,
yes.
It's a good idea.
Okay.
Any further questions before we open this
I'm really out on a limb here. I'm trying to craft something, so I will be fine.
Great, thank you. Public testimony.
Yes, we have 2 people signed up,
Very good.
Mary Ann Schwab and Mary Syke.
Very good. 3 minutes, name for the record, please.
Yeah.
I guess I outlived everybody again. My name's Mary Syke. Just a couple things that kind of jumped out at me about this that caused me to kind of have some concerns and share some of Commissioner Saltzman's concerns and Mayor Wheeler's concerns. It's sort of like this is a hot potato. It doesn't really fit in ONI, but the auditor's office, where it seemed to be appropriate, doesn't want it. The county elections office doesn't want it. I find that a little concerning, you know. Gee, you can just say, I don't want it, and it doesn't fall under that bureau. That kind of bothers me. I think the whole idea of a third-party administrator is right on target. I completely agree with that. The other concern that I have is when you say short-term. You know, moving forward with this and doing this on the short term, and you know, if it's not the perfect solution, then let's fix it. I would suggest that if you're going to do it with that in mind, that you establish some time limit, because if you don't, short term becomes permanent long term, just by default. And I think you need to, you know, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's an amendment you can put in there or something, but I would just like to throw that out there for you to kind of be thinking about that, because this is a really, really critical, important issue, and it just, you know, kind of being treated like a hot potato concerns me, yeah. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate it very much. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Mary Ann Schwab, and I have been down this road along with Amanda Fritz. I went out and collected signatures. It does work. I like your new model. And what we didn't have back then was Facebook, Tweeters, all of the media now. And not having that, I can speak for myself. I paid a total of $385 and collected well over 6,000 votes, came in third, second only to Mark Lehman, who is the one who spearheaded our Dignity Village. I also, one of the aides was Bonnie McKnight, who is still with your land use group here in the city. Another is Dr. Paul Leonard, who works in your Office of Neighborhood Involvement. And I followed very closely our last campaign when Commissioner Udaley was running and all the candidates. And at the time I ran, I had 6 weeks. My husband's brother-in-law and wife were in Portland, Oregon for the first time from Vienna, Austria, celebrating their 40th anniversary. In between all the community meetings, I carpooled with Tom Potter. So we went 2,000 miles around the state with her tourist book written in German, including your Oregon gardens, the Japanese gardens, all the way the Circle of Mount Hood, over to Bend. We had a marvelous time. We love Portland, as do our extended members. We've had other family members come as well. In addition, I was getting an elder out of a nursing home, had volunteers from a church come strip wallpaper that had been on since '71, hired nursing staff, and in between riding with Tom Potter all over the city. It's busy time, it was an exciting time, and what really excites me today is the high bar that was set by the young women who spoke today. I have every hope for our city, and I want this done right, and as a retired high school secretary, this type of thing came under other tasks as assigned. I'm not going to tell you what some of those were. But I am a little concerned that a highly skilled, highly respected, competent city auditor is not wanting to take this on when we're going to have an independent, much like your the school levy, or the children's levy, and much like your arts in the school, how all of this has been done. I really support and would like to see this eventually in the auditor's office. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is.
It doesn't seem like it's on yet. There you go.
Good morning.
Marion,
Good morning.
There you go. You got it.
Good morning. My name is Lightning with Lightning Super Justice Watchdog. Again, on my position is that for the auditor not to take this, we might want to look at replacing the auditor. The auditor's office is the perfect choice for this. It's where this should be. And for the auditor to sidetrack this, I think is not doing her job in a professional manner. And again, before you interrupt me, Commissioner Fish, let me finish my statement. And again, it is my understanding that the mayor has the authority to transfer this over to the auditor.
I do not.
Nope, it's in the charter.
Then at that point, you have the authority to make sure that this is going to be an independent process, not looked over by another commissioner, where we have heard that the range of conflicts of interest are going to be overlooking this at any and all times. And as a watchdog, following Judicial Watch and as you know, on everything that the Clinton Foundation put together, we're going to be watching this very close, every move that Commissioner Fritz makes. Now, I don't want to have to do that, to be honest, because I have a lot of respect for Commissioner Fritz and the job that she does and the way that she operates in a professional manner and the hours that she puts in on this job far beyond that most people would ever do. But you are putting me now in a position to have to do that as a watchdog, and I will do it. And if there is any communication that appears to be out of line, and it is all public record, then we have to respond back to you, and I don't like to have to do that. That's why I like to have an auditor or somebody independent that is required not to have a conflict of interest, and I don't have to worry about it. But it appears though you want to just throw something out here without even a time frame to change it. Well, we might do it down the line. We might do it after 2 years. We'll see what we can do. Well, that doesn't tell the public much. That just says you might do something. Why don't you put something in writing that will make sure this is going to be changed within 12 months? How about 2 years in writing? Not just to another commissioner, but to an independent body. And to see if the auditor at this time might possibly consider doing this. Because I think from an auditor's position, to deny this, to be overlooked by the auditor is not professional. I really believe that. And I'm more than glad to say that to the auditor. I agree with the auditor on many things, and I disagree. And we have discussions all the time about it. I absolutely disagree with the auditor on this. And I'm kind of almost mystified, to be honest, why she would not take this and overlook it. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Mayor, can I just make a comment?
Commissioner Fish, yes.
Thank you, ladies. It does seem a little fair that the auditor is not here to respond. I will just say, while I have enormous respect for Lightning and his commentary when he comes before us, we recently had a vote on a ballot measure which enshrined in our charter the auditor's independence. Auditor Hull Caballero is an independent auditor. While she is one of the 6 elected officials that leads the city, the charter makes very clear that she is an independent actor. And in the conversations, Mayor, that I was privy to, I never heard her say anything that would qualify for the criticism that she sought to sidetrack this particular program, or that she was in some way unprofessional. I do recall her saying that she felt she had.
Opinion, Mr. Fish.
I'm just making my comment.
Democracy.
I did hear her on a number of occasions opine.
Don't speak on my behalf.
I'm not speaking on your behalf. I did hear her on a number of occasions say that she had capacity issues. The mayor has made a commitment to take another run at this, and I think that's wise. But let us not forget that the independent auditor is and has her own office. The charter gives her the power to make these decisions on her own, and I don't think it's fruitful for us to question her motives.
Yeah, Commissioner Fish, I want to make it very clear. I agree wholeheartedly. You know, my late father used to say, if you don't get something you want, it's not the other person's fault. It's yours for not having a good sales pitch. And so I have heard what the auditor has said. She's made a very good argument, and I think the strategy that we're laying out here by way of getting the office stood up, getting it fully operational, making sure that if there are any glitches, we have those glitches ironed out and fully addressed. I think that will give others confidence to take it on as an independent enterprise. So I see this as a necessary first step, given the reality that the county won't take it and the auditor won't take it, and short of a great sales pitch, we can't make them. Commissioner Saltzman.
You know, I have a lot of respect for my colleagues here and Commissioner Fritz and you, Daly, and the hard work Tim's done, but I can't support this in its present form. It just doesn't look right. And, you know, I guess I need to see something. You know, we talked a lot about the Children's Levy. Well, the Children's Levy has a 5-person oversight committee that oversees the decisions of the Children's Levy. So unless there's some sort of a check and balance, and I'm just not seeing any checks and balances, we are only human. We are subject to the opinions of our colleagues and the office, and as to how it relates to the offices we're in charge of. You know, there's got to be a better way. You know, I would find the Office of Management and Finance to be, you know, which houses many miscellaneous little programs to be.
And who does that report to?
It reports to somebody, but it's a big bureau. It has a lot of multi-functions. So I'm not trying to make this a personal attack on my colleague at all. I'm just saying this is an imperfect solution that I cannot support in this present.
Commissioner Fritz, I would like to make a motion to delete the emergency clause.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second on the table. I want to give Tim an opportunity to respond to Commissioner Saltzman.
Yeah, I just wanted to take this opportunity quickly to mention that this does in fact have a commission in the I didn't bring it up because it was part of the original proposal, but it does have a commission that will provide oversight to the program. So it's not just the commissioner providing oversight. It's a commission. We're happy to engage all the offices in how we select that. I can't remember if it's specific in the code on how it's selected, but it certainly will not be a hand-picked group that is going to represent Commissioner Fritz's views.
I'm sure it'll be very clear in the administrative rules that you bring forward.
So, you know, I don't know if that helps you or not.
No,
but
I do appreciate that, but still, it's not overcoming
oversight.
what I sense is the fundamental friction point in putting this type of a program, which a lot of citizens are going to be looking at, or residents of Portland are going to be looking at for success or failure. And it seems like we're sort of putting it in the column of high risk. And again, this is no disrespect to Commissioner Fritz at all. It's the structure of having the Open and Accountable Elections Office under the purview, direct purview of a commissioner in charge. That
There
just
is
doesn't
no
look right.
alternative, Commissioner.
There is alternatives. You know, we hired a retired Supreme Court justice to run our COAB. Why not reach out to some retired judge to be the
Colleagues,
administrator of this program?
we're not going to settle this issue today. I call a vote on the motion.
I would like to
Commissioner
make a comment.
Daly.
I've been quietly waiting. I just want to echo some of the sentiments of my colleagues and reaffirm to the public, we cannot compel an independent office such as the auditor or the Multnomah County Elections Office to take a program that we decide to create. And it's perfectly reasonable that the auditor or the elections office doesn't want to take this on. I do believe that, you know, once we do stand up the office and kind of perform a proof of concept, that they may be more willing to take it on. And I do believe it's a very worthwhile undertaking. And as far as a bureau not wanting it, that is simply because of the perception or possibility of actual conflict of interest with a mayor or a commissioner overseeing a bureau that is home to this program. So it's not ideal. I'm not opposed to putting some kind of timeline on it. No? Okay, well, I'm going to withdraw that suggestion then. Because I am happy to defer to my colleague, Commissioner Fritz, who has devoted an extraordinary amount of time to this, and my office also devoted an extraordinary amount of time to this, and including seeking input from the budget office, which was helpful and ultimately led to our decision.
Very good. So is there anything else before I call the question on the amendment? Call the roll on the amendment, please.
Fritz?
So we'll take the emergency clause off, so we'll vote on it next week. Commissioner Daly, I appreciate what you just said. Certainly reflecting that it's going to be a large amount of work. that the Office of Neighbourhood Involvement already has a large amount of work, so it's not a matter of you're not prioritising it, it's more a matter of the workload that you have taken on. And so I respect that very much, and I think that's what my Chief of Staff meant to say. Commissioner Saltzman, you didn't vote for this in the first place. It's very clear that you don't support the programme. I respond to Mr. Lightning. He's not here now. My life is an open book. If there's any secrets I have, I never have them anymore, because I strive for transparency, for accountability, and watch my every move on this. I'd be happy to give you an absolute verbatim transcript of every conversation I have on it, Commissioner Saltzman, if you'd like that. I don't think that actually gets us anywhere, because unless we want to do a charter change that says that the voters assign this to the auditor, she does have the right to decide what she takes and what she doesn't take, and that's what we're dealing with right now. Anywhere else in the city, it's going to be under a commissioner in charge, whether it's the mayor within the Office of Management and Finance. Frankly, I don't think we want to bury $1.2 million worth of taxpayers' money deep within a bureau, or potentially not even separate from the city either, with no commissioner oversight on how that $1.2 million, whether it's allocated as the program requires or not. And so I take great responsibility and pride in this program, and I appreciate the mayor being willing to assign it to me. At least I hope you will immediately after the vote next week. Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Well, I want to respond to what Commissioner Fritz just said a minute ago, which I was going to say anyway, but I did oppose this concept when it came to a vote in City Council in 2016, I believe. But my no vote today is not based on that. I lost that vote, so the program is here. And my job here is to make sure that this program is set up to run as smoothly as possible. And as I expressed earlier, I just not comfortable with this arrangement. And as I said, Commissioner Fritz, it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the structural dynamic of having a commissioner in charge, overseeing open and accountable elections. Commissioner in charges are human. We're all human. We talk to our colleagues. We're subject to their opinions and influence. And I think that is improper. And I've heard no discussion today of a solution of proposing a charter amendment that would assign this to the auditor.
I just said that.
No, I know, but you just discussed it in your vote. We didn't discuss it earlier. And so I think not touching that elephant in the room, we're sort of setting this up for failure in the minds of our residents of our city. I have no doubt you'll run the program absolutely clear and transparently, but if you ask 9 out of 10 people on the street, should open and accountable elections be under the purview of a commissioner in charge, I'm pretty confident 9 out of 10 people are going to say, that gives me pause. So with all due respect, I am going to vote no.
You, Daly?
This has just been a really lively day.
It's only 11:30.
Just getting started.
Women's History Month, it's all that
Yeah.
did it to us.
Well, I mean, once again, as someone of very limited means who pulled off an unlikely win for Portland City Council, I'm very supportive of any effort to make these seats more accessible to more diverse candidates, and I look forward to using this program myself. Aye.
Wheeler.
So I want to respect what Commissioner Saltzman has said, and I appreciate the liveliness of this discussion because it needs to be said, and I'm glad it's been said publicly. And I know there are a lot of people in the community, Mary Ann and others, who've worked really, really hard over a period of many years to bring this program to the city of Portland. And I think we've now illustrated very clearly and very transparently the potential conflicts that exist having this be in the office of a sitting commissioner. And therefore, this is the point where I would also call on the community of people who support this program to work with us and encourage not only us, but also community organizations that have the capacity and the independence and the respect of the community to be the ultimate home for this effort. I do trust Commissioner Fritz to stand this program up, and I feel very comfortable that she will be able to do it in an open and transparent manner, if for no other reason than that the public will be looking at this one with a microscope every single step of the way. But I do not want it in a commissioner's office for a prolonged period of time. I would prefer it to be in the auditor's office, and barring that, I would prefer it to be in an independent community institution that that operates it, that collects the data, that reports back to the public in an open and transparent manner. That's where this ultimately belongs. Dan is absolutely right about that in terms of where this needs to go over the long term. I vote aye. The amendment is adopted. Unless there's any further comment on the part of my colleagues, this is the first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading as amended. Thank you, Tim, for your presentation. Next item, number 220.
Amend to make permanent the mandatory relocation assistance for involuntary displacement of tenants under affordable housing preservation and Portland renter protections.
Colleagues, we have already received a presentation on this matter. We have taken extensive public testimony on this matter. There are two amendments currently on the table. Would it be helpful if I reread those into the record, Robert, just so everybody remembers what the two amendments are?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the first amendment, which we're just calling the Fritz Amendment, is a motion to add to exemption list 30.01.085G 12 a dwelling unit where the landlord has provided a fixed-term tenancy and notified the tenant prior to occupancy of the landlord's intent to sell or permanently convert the dwelling unit to a use other than a dwelling unit subject to the act. And that was moved by Commissioner Fritz and seconded by myself. Commissioner Saltzman has offered an amendment, a motion to delete exemption 30.01.085G section 8 for dwelling unit as regulated affordable housing by a federal, state, or local government, and add a directive that the Rental Services Commission come back with a recommendation to council. That was moved by Commissioner Saltzman and seconded by Commissioner Daly. We have not called the vote on either amendment. Commissioner Fish, then Commissioner Saltzman.
No, I'll let Dan go.
Commissioner Saltzman, then Commissioner Fish.
I have since met with the Housing Bureau Director and talked more about the exemption that I was proposing to strike because I clearly felt that it was very cryptically written. I felt that, it still is, but it sounded to me like we were proposing to exempt the largest landlord in the city of Portland from any responsibility for following this ordinance in terms of no-cause evictions or rent increases. And I couldn't, you know, I can't tolerate that, but if we can establish a legislative history today, I am prepared to withdraw my amendment if this legislative history, which I think is the intent of this amendment, is clarified. So I would request that the Housing Bureau work with the affordable housing providers and the Community Alliance of Tenants to craft a narrow exemption for affordable housing providers for rent increases that may exceed 10%. That would be if that increase does not increase the tenant's portion of the rent, i.e. it's paid for out of the Section 8 voucher, or it's in a circumstance where the rent increase is required due to a change in the tenant's income or due to requirements of a regulatory agreement. And this exemption shall not in any way apply to no-cause evictions. So that is what I would, if we are all of the common mind about that, I would withdraw my amendment.
Commissioner Saltzman, thank you for that. I'd like to hear from Housing Bureau Director Shannon Callahan on the amendment.
Do you have it written out, Commissioner?
I have my statement written up here.
It's really helpful to me to be able to read an amendment as long as that.
It's not an amendment. It's asking for establishing legislative history, and then I would withdraw my amendment to delete that exemption.
I see, thank you.
So, Director Callahan, you've obviously been provided this language. Do you have any problems or objections to this language being in the record?
None at all, and I actually think that captures the intent that we inelegantly put into the draft ordinance, and I'd be happy to return to council on that issue after consulting with the Community Alliance of Tenants and Housing Providers. Thank you.
Excellent.
Sounds like an elegant solution. Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you. So Commissioner Saltzman withdraws his amendment. Commissioner Fish, thank you, Commissioner.
Mayor, I'd like to add an amendment, which will just style the Fish Amendment, which would slap an emergency clause on the matter before us.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fish to add an emergency clause. We have a second from Commissioner Udaly. Any further discussion on that amendment? Commissioner Fritz?
Well, I just noticed that there's a I think it's an error, but it's more than a scrivener's error in the proposed code, and that is on page 3 of 4, where we've got all the exemptions listed under G, but then we've also got a paragraph that talks about the one dwelling unit exemption, which we're doing away with the one dwelling unit exemption. So it seems to me that we should strike that paragraph unless staff has another. Do you know what answer here?
Yeah, I think we actually, we had written, yeah.
So what's?
No. So Matthew Schauble with the Housing Bureau for the record. I think this is another example of the current code and transitioning to a permanent policy where the language is not exactly how we would have phrased it, but working with the city attorney's office, it is workable, particularly with the Bureau's rulemaking. The paragraph is still important because it is still possible that an owner of a dwelling unit that qualifies for an exemption would contract with a property management firm to lease that unit out. And without that paragraph, they would lose the exemption if they were to contract with a property management firm. And,
why?
Sorry, Commissioner?
Why would they lose the exemption? Because the exemption is not predicated on it being a one-owner property. So there's nothing in G that says anything about whether the landlord contracts with a property management company.
So they would lose the exemption because under ORS 90 and state statute, the property management firm would effectively become the landlord in this scenario. And thus, in the exemptions with the reference to landlord from the definition of landlord, the property management firm would not qualify for many of the exemptions, but the owner of the rental unit, the dwelling unit, would qualify. And it just has to do with just a discrepancy in how a dwelling unit is defined between state statute and city code, as well as the definition of landlord.
Okay, so then what we need to amend is, it says a landlord that authorizes a property manager is subject to and manages property in accordance with ORS 696 to manage only one dwelling unit, does not waive the one unit exemption, but it's not the one unit exemption, it does not waive any of the exemptions in G 1 through 11.
So, Commissioner, we had looked at this issue prior to coming to council, and we had talked to the city attorney about it. We would be interpreting one essentially as A in our administrative rules, and we have that authority to do so. So it literally is the choice of the word one versus the choice of the word or letter A. And we did consult with attorneys.
Okay. I just thought that the whole purpose of, well, one of the purposes is to do away with the so-called one unit dwelling unit exemption, and then it becomes unclear in that paragraph. But if you're all fine with it, that's fine.
Well, we had actually written amendment language to address that and had the conversation, and we were assured that it could be corrected.
Okay,
yeah.
That's fine. Thank you.
Plus, I believe the director has heard very clearly on the record as well.
Yes.
So thank you.
That is helpful, and we are already prepared to address that issue.
Very good. Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Mayor.
Commissioner Udaly.
Yes, thank you. So similarly to Commissioner Saltzman, I'm happy to support this ordinance as amended today, but I want to put a few comments on the record about some ongoing concerns I have and make a request around those. I strongly feel the family move-in exemption is too vague, and it's could be subject to abuse. This type of exemption is currently causing problems in other cities with similar tenant protections, such as San Francisco. So I request that we take a closer look at that. Thank you Commissioner Saltzman for addressing the issue with affordable housing providers, and thank you, Shannon, for pursuing that. Obviously, we don't want to penalize affordable housing providers who have to follow certain rules about income-based rents, but we also don't want to leave those tenants with no protections if, in the event they're subject to a no-cause eviction, for instance. We have not closed the loophole for landlords who unbundle their flat rate utility, pet, and parking fees and dramatically increase those while also increasing rent. And we've heard over and over again that this is happening to tenants. They're receiving not just a 9.9% rent increase, which is well above the average rental increase in Portland at this point, and well above any reasonable or average increase in expenses. And then on top of that, they're paying more for utilities, more for parking, more for pet rent. So I'm hoping that we dive into that. And then the language that allows for the expiration of rent concessions is also vague and open to exploitation. And it's a loophole that's been a huge problem for tenants in New York, where I'm not even sure if I can adequately explain this because it's not a super common practice right now, but it certainly could become one where, say the rent is $2,000, but the landlord makes a concession and only charges $12,000, but then they get to make their rental increase off the $2,000. So it's just, you know, unfortunately, people are going to be looking for any workaround they can find on the relocation assistance, and I just want to make sure that we close as many loopholes as possible. So I am asking the mayor, requesting that the mayor direct the Rental Services Commission to review these concerns and make recommendations regarding what policy or administrative measures can be taken to ensure they do not inadvertently harm a tenant's right to receive relocation assistance as intended by the City Council. And I thank you. I just realized I hadn't had coffee yet today, which is unacceptable. I'm going to be talking
that explains
to my...
a lot.
It
that
really
explains
does.
a lot.
Like,
That's why it's so long today.
Yes. I'm going to request that the report be provided to the entire council no later than June 30th, 2018, if you think that's a reasonable timeline.
So I just want to publicly acknowledge what you've requested and say I agree that that is an appropriate issue to bring to the Rental Services Commission. I'm not going to commit on the timeline today, although that seems reasonable to me. I'm not entirely sure exactly what's involved in the process, but I will get back to you on that when I have a clear understanding. I want to also acknowledge that there have been abuses of this particular standard in other cities, and I think we owe it to ourselves to do a wide-ranging evaluation of what loopholes have turned up in other cities that have adopted these kinds of policies and make sure that we close all of them. Thank you for putting that on the record.
So, Mayor, we have two amendments to vote on.
Two amendments to vote on. The first is the Fritz amendment. This is the motion to add the exemption list. Please call the roll.
Fritz.
I appreciate Mayor Wheeler and Commissioner Udaley being willing to accept this amendment, which I think will protect some single property owners who need the relief. Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The amendment's adopted. Please call the roll on the Fish amendment.
Mayor,
Commissioner Fish.
Council has asked us to just state for the record the purpose of this amendment, and that, of course, is to put this into effect immediately to avoid any gaps in regulatory oversight.
Commissioner Fish has stated that. Please call the roll on the emergency.
Fritz.
So I again state appreciation for Commissioner Udaley and Mayor Wheeler approving the amendment that we just passed, which was why I'm able to support adding the emergency clause, in fact proposed adding the emergency clause. And I think the worst of all possible worlds is having the gap, as we saw when we did the notice for rent increases, that there was a gap and people took advantage of it. So it's important that the rules go into effect right away, whether you like them or not. It's then clear what the rules are. Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Wheeler?
So I'm going to vote no on this amendment, and the reason that we did not originally put an emergency clause on this ordinance was that the Housing Bureau had expressed to me that being able to stand this up immediately will be very, very challenging to do right. And I respect their opinions on this matter, but since I'm pretty good at counting, I know that I'm not going to win this particular one, and I will pledge to my colleagues that although I disagree with the emergency clause, that will not remove from us the responsibility to do the best job we can to make sure that this is stood up appropriately. And since I have the two leaders from the Housing Bureau here listening to this conversation, they know what the challenge is, and they will rise to meet it. I vote aye, I vote no, sorry. The amendment is adopted. And so that gets us to moving it to
Vote on the motion.
second reading.
No, it's
Oh, I'm sorry, I lost that one. I was trying to pull a fast one, Commissioner Fitch, sorry. Please call the roll on the main motion as amended.
Fritz?
This is a very challenging issue, and I very much appreciate everybody who's participated in the community and on the council. We're still getting into more of a one-size-fits-all philosophy, which I think is sometimes not helpful. I would have preferred to have waited until the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs was in full force with registration of landlords. One of the challenges we have is that landlords didn't know that this was being discussed and found out afterwards. And if we had had the registration first, we would have much more data, as the Mayor said in one of the memos he sent out. It's anecdotally said that there are 24,000 Portlanders who rent out only one unit. We haven't got verification of that. I'm concerned that at least some of those landlords will either raise the rent 9.9% every year until they've saved up the relocation fee, or sell the home or convert it to an Airbnb. And I don't see either of those options as being in the best interests of renters. But given that we are relying on anecdotal experience, we know that many, many tenants have needed this, that we know that it has reduced the number of no-cause evictions, and we know that it has been crucial for some people. And so throughout my time on the council, in fact, throughout my time on the Planning Commission as well, I've always strived to provide more choices for people who have fewer options. And in this case, it's clear that while there are some landlords who have very few options and who are going to find it very challenging to find the relocation money at a time where they may themselves be destitute and needing to sell the home in order to be able to get out of that debt. We have heard from some of those. On balance, there's many more people who are getting the no-cause evictions, and they and their families are being greatly impacted by that. I do hope, Mayor, that as you move forward, you will look at other countries as well as other jurisdictions in finding refinements that work better for all parties, because I think that there is also the danger of more for-cause evictions, which, while they are more expensive for all parties and take longer, then result in the records of tenants making a few people making it even harder for them to rent. We heard at the hearing from a landlord who said that she's already taking fewer risks on tenants that she would previously have given a chance to, because she knows that there's a extended process and a financial impact to that. So on balance, I'm able to support it, and I appreciate the good-heartedness and the values and principles of everybody who's been involved in this debate. It's a really tough one, and I hope that this moves us a step forward. Aye.
Fish.
Thank you, Mayor and colleagues. I just have a brief statement I'd like to read. I believe that housing is a human right, but a safe, affordable place to live is becoming increasingly out of reach for too many Portlanders. In October of 2015, Council recognized the magnitude of the crisis in our community and declared a housing state of emergency. Since then, we've taken a number of steps to help Portlanders who are struggling to keep up with rising rents and the shortage of affordable housing. We successfully lobbied the state legislature to give us new tools like inclusionary housing, which requires affordable apartments in any new construction. We work with the community to pass a $250 million housing bond to fund new affordable homes across our community. We created the City-County Joint Office of Homeless Services to streamline programs and services for our most vulnerable, and we committed record funding to their work. We pledged to bring 2,000 new units of supportive housing online, deeply affordable homes with services for people struggling, with services for people living outside and struggling with severe medical, mental health, and addiction challenges over the next 10 years. We welcome new partners to the table to help us craft new solutions. And today we are making a successful new program permanent, protecting Portland renters from economic eviction. I'm pleased that we've been able to work through some complex issues and arrive at a consensus policy that will, after today, become permanent. There is no shortage of anxiety and uncertainty in the world and in our community right now. Portland tenants shouldn't have to worry whether they're going to come home to notice of a 20% rate increase, whether their child is going to have to change schools and start somewhere else mid-year, whether they'll have to choose between groceries or medicine, or whether they'll be able to keep a roof over their family's head. Now, we all understand that the market forces at work here are too big for any local government to contain, but we have an obligation to step up and lead in the ways that we can. Today, we are doing that. Thank you, Commissioner Udaley and Mayor Wheeler, for your leadership and partnership on this issue. Thank you to all the tenants who have shared their stories with us. And thank you to the community for pushing us to act. Aye.
Well, I just want to thank Commissioner Udaley for bringing this concept in the first month of her office and first month of holding office here at City Council, and for her and Mayor Wheeler for getting this over the finish line. It's a very important piece of legislation. Aye.
Udaley.
Before I begin my closing statements, I just want to acknowledge something that Commissioner Fritz said, which is that we do know that there are extraordinary circumstances for some homeowners, and we certainly do not want to create true hardship for them. And that's why I hope we will be pursuing some kind of hardship exemption or assistance for those landlords who may genuinely be unable to pay the relocation assistance. We know that 1/3 of our homeowners are also cost burdened by housing costs, as well as half of our renters. And those two statistics together paint a somewhat terrifying picture of how unstable and unaffordable housing is for the majority of our residents, or at least roughly half. So we need to change the conversation about the landlord-tenant relationship. Our unregulated rental market, in no small part, has led us to where we are today in an 8-year and counting unprecedented housing crisis and homelessness crisis. We are asking landlords to consider the impact that their decisions have, not just on their tenants, but on our communities and on the city. And we're requiring them to share in the burden that they have been creating, whether they realize it or not. And our residents and our city have been absorbing the cost of thus far. As Commissioner Fish said, housing is a human right, whether our federal government wants to recognize that or not. It cannot be treated like any other commodity. In fact, we need to treat affordable housing as part of our essential infrastructure. I am so grateful to be here in this moment. I'm trying not to get emotional, but it's a very personal issue for me and for many of our residents. I want to thank all of my colleagues for supporting this ordinance and working with us over the past year. We have received, as you can imagine, mountains of comment and input, opinions, experiences, scenarios of the good and the bad on relocation assistance. And after all that input, I can say with absolute confidence that it was and continues to be the right thing to do. And until the state gives us back our other regulatory tools, it's really one of the only things that we could do. I want to take a few minutes to thank some very important people without whom none of this would have been possible. First, I want to recognize the support and dedication of Commissioner Fish and his entire staff. I never anticipated when I was elected to this job that Commissioner Fish would be such a strident and unwavering ally in housing issues and tenant protections. In fact, part of the reason I ran is I felt council was not responding to our housing crisis as a cost burden, you know, that being my perspective as a cost burden tenant. And I'm so relieved to find that, that they absolutely are ready and willing to do that. After a year of working with Commissioner Fish, he continues to surprise me with his deep compassion, his brilliant contributions, and his excitement for the work we're doing to help solve this housing crisis. In addition, his staff are a true reflection of him. They are also passionate, brilliant, and amazing partners in policy development. Jamie Dunphy, Amira Streeter, and Sonia Schmensky are communicative, it'd be good if I could pronounce that word, huh? Supportive, and full of great ideas, and also candy, both of us. I'm honored to serve alongside Commissioner Fish as we continue to build true foundations for tenant rights in the city and all we have yet to do together. Thank you, Commissioner. I also want to thank the Mayor's office and his staff for never wavering from making this policy permanent and for dedicating the immense resources and time it has taken to get this policy into a place that better serves vulnerable tenants and provides fairness for both parties. He co-sponsored our original policy and recognized it for the visionary and unprecedented policy that it is. It is true that no one up here has taken more heat and has had more conversations about relocation assistance than the mayor and his staff. What they have committed to tenants is in this policy is remarkable. I especially want to thank Cupid Alexander and Nathan Howard for listening to the concerns and ideas of hundreds of tenants and landlords and helping craft a policy that meets the needs of many. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
I want to thank the members of the Relocation Technical Advisory Committee who spent many hours debating the merits and nuance of every single word in this policy. I have to admit that I was a little skeptical that a committee made up of such ardent advocates for both sides could find middle ground, and yet here we are with a policy that does that in many ways. This committee included the Community Alliance of Tenants, who never fail to remind us of the deep inequities our policies often create and demand that we remember whose voices we're missing. Portland Tenants United, who never fail to pack the room and remind us just how many people are paying attention. Legal Aid Services and Oregon Law Center, who always bring the sobering realities of what a lack of legal protections means for tenants in real life. And several nonprofit housing providers who truly understand both sides of the aisle better than any of us. But I especially and most gratefully want to thank the landlord and industry advocates who stuck it out with this committee. Those who chose to listen, to contribute, to adapt. I'm deeply appreciative of the perspective you brought to the table and the commitment you made to improving the relationship between tenants and landlords. I know our office has included many of you in other tenant-focused policy development, and your service to these issues is very appreciated. Finally, I want to thank my own staff, to my Chief of Staff, Marshall Runkle, for going to bat when it counted the most, and to my Director of Policy, Jamie Duhamel, who actually started working on this policy before we even took our seat, possibly before I even won the seat. And in the very first staff meeting of our very first day in office, brought us a proposal. She wrote this little part. It was a little, I'm just gonna, apparently I said, I like it. And here we are. So I'm gonna start saying that a lot more often. It really was an impressive and bold move, and I'm really proud of her. I gave her full rein to explore what was possible, and she did. She authored the original policy and has spent every single day since it passed dedicated not only to its ongoing success, but to the mission of better tenant protections across the board. More on that soon, but not today. So for now, thank you to all of my staff who've worked on this issue. Actually, I really need to thank Josiah at our front desk for fielding all the phone calls. That's not an easy job. So thanks to my staff who've worked on this issue in one way or another and have fearlessly led the charge. I feel lucky to have such an amazing team. And with that, I vote aye.
Wheeler?
Well, I want to thank my colleagues on the Portland City Council. We are providing clear and definitive leadership and protecting tenants in a time of great economic uncertainty and great housing uncertainty. As I said last week, there's really three main aspects to the ordinance that we are voting in support of today. First of all, it takes our temporary relocation ordinance and it makes it permanent. Second, it expands the number of people who are protected by its provisions. And last, but certainly not least, it now gives us the authority to stand up the program where we'll be able to register rental units in our city and collect quality data. And I want to reiterate again that this is something that people on both the landlord side of the equation and the tenant side of the equation have requested. I certainly have my difference of opinion with regard to the emergency clause today. The Housing Bureau, as I said, will have to work doubly quickly to stand their portion of this up. We're going to have to work very, very quickly to notify landlords of the changes that have taken place under this ordinance. And I would ask anybody who has the ability to reach a large number of landlords to help us get this information out as quickly as possible. And I'm certainly committed to participate in that as well. I want to thank everybody who worked on this. I think this has touched just about everybody in this building and on city staff in some important way. I'm certainly very happy about the leadership that my own team has provided, that my colleagues and their staffs have provided, that many, many, many community members have provided. Thank you, everybody. I think this is, on the whole, outstanding and powerful work. Thank you. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted as amended. And with that, we move right into item 221, please.
Vacate a portion of Northeast Mark Street between Northeast 109th Avenue and Northeast 112th Avenue, subject to certain conditions and reservations.
Commissioner Saltzman.
Thank you, Mayor. Certainly a tough act to follow. But I'll try to make this LID exciting.
Ups and downs of council agenda, yes.
This is a street vacation. It was initiated by the Portland Bureau of Transportation after PBOT completed in the local improvement district in the area, which included reconstructing portions of Northeast 109th and Northeast 112th Avenue, and doing sidewalk infill and ADA ramps along with portions of Northeast Mark Street. Staff's here to answer any questions if there's anybody.
Colleagues, any questions? Oh, do you have a presentation?
Oh, I was going to add a couple of little things. I'm Carl Aruda with the right-of-way agent at the Bureau of the Transportation. As the commissioner mentioned, this is a street vacation. There's a couple of maps and photos to explain that this is part one of a three-part street vacation. And Mark Street is between 109th and 112th Avenue, where we're doing this vacation. There's basically some excess right-of-way behind the sidewalks that were constructed, and PBOT has no use for the additional right-of-way behind the sidewalks, and vacating the right-of-way provides a little bit additional development potential for some of the landlords. But PBOT itself has no reason to retain the right-of-way. PBOT solicited the usual comments from other bureaus and agencies, utilities. PP&L requested an easement for some of the poles and wires in the near the vacation area. And Water Bureau asked us to check the location of some of their water meters. But generally, this is a relatively straightforward vacation area for the excess right-of-way.
Why were there no street trees, and why are we not using the right-of-way for street trees?
You mean as part of the LID?
Uh-huh.
I believe, well, there was some lighting that was installed as part of the LID, and I don't know if, Andrew, Abby, if you have any
Hi, Carl.
insight?
Andrew Abbey, I don't mean to steal your thunder,
Oh, no,
Carl.
that's fine, yes.
Those pictures were actually taken before the street trees were planted. And we actually haven't planted the trees yet, but we are going to have urban forestry do that. We kind of missed the planting window last year. We didn't want to plant them and have 100 of them die. And so we're going to be planting them. So there will be street trees.
So they're going in this stormwater planter?
No, they're going to be in the furnishing zone in between where there are not stormwater planters. So in the furnishing zone, you'll either have a stormwater planter or you'll have a street tree.
So we don't need, in this particular photograph, we don't need the right-of-way to put street trees in?
Correct. Yeah, the area in which the street trees will be planted is the area of the right-of-way that we'll retain. So the only area of the right-of-way that we're vacating, as Carl mentioned, is behind the sidewalk. And we, with few exceptions, don't generally plant street trees behind the sidewalk.
And was the Urban Forestry Department okay with the LID plan and the trees that you are going to plant?
They extensively reviewed all three versions of the plans, and we worked very closely with them throughout the project. So
great, thank you.
Thank you.
Colleagues, any more questions? Carla, has
Have
anyone?
more?
Oh, I'm sorry, there's still more presentation?
Oh, no, I'm sorry,
Carla,
Any
has anyone
questions?
signed up to testify?
Yes, sorry, we had, 221, wrong one.
Does
No one
Does
for
anyone
this
wish
one.
to testify? Seeing none. So this is an ordinance. It goes to a second hearing?
Yes.
Dan, last word?
No, last word, thank you.
Thank you very much. The matter goes to a last word. Carla, would you please read Council Item 222?
Vacate a portion of Northeast 112th Avenue, south of Northeast Deering Drive, subject to certain conditions and reservations.
Do we have someone presenting on this?
This is being referred back.
Oh, this is coming back to my office. Sorry.
Without objection, this is being returned to Dan's office. Carla, could you please read Council Item 223?
Vacate portions of Northeast Deering Drive and Northeast 112th Avenue and Northeast 111th Avenue, subject to certain conditions and reservations.
Matt, is this going back?
This is coming back.
Without objection, this is returned to Commissioner Saltzman's office. Please read Council Item 224.
Create a local improvement district to construct street, sidewalk, stormwater, and sanitary sewer improvements in the Northeast 57th Avenue and Killingsworth Street Local Improvement District.
I will just, Mr. President, turn this over to Andrew Abbey.
Thank you, Commissioner Saltzman. I'll just make a few comments while I'm getting the PowerPoint ready to go. So Council approved resolution number 37340 in January, which initiated local improvement district formation proceedings with over 80% petition support for the LID. So I think the council knows, thank you, Carla. I think the council knows that all LIDs undergo a two-part formation process, and this is the second of two different steps. So I'm just going to walk you through some issues that were raised in the remonstrances that were submitted. So the common theme of the remonstrances was that there was a request to close 57th Avenue north of Northeast Emerson Street. And I just wanted to show you a map of how few north-south street connections we have in Cully. So this particular map that I'm showing you are the local streets in Cully. And you can see that between Northeast 52nd Avenue and Northeast 60th Avenue, which are the next available north-south local street connections, that's a distance of 2,226 feet. Section 17.88 of City Code calls for a maximum distance of street connections to be 530 feet. So for those reasons, the city engineer and the city traffic engineer cannot support this request to close Northeast 57th Avenue. This is another map of neighborhood collector and higher classification streets. These are the streets that we would like to have to actually shift traffic. So in Cully, our preferential streets to carry the bulk of the traffic would be Northeast 42nd Avenue and Northeast Cully Boulevard. As you can see from this map, Cully Boulevard is not a due north-south street. It runs diagonally. And the total distance between 42nd and Cully is 6,697 feet. So whether you approve this LID or you don't approve this LID, really the point I'm trying to make with these two slides is we have a real dearth of north-south street connections in Cully. I am not surprised that the property owners have a concern about traffic, because what happens is the traffic tend to concentrate on the few north-south street connections that we have remaining. It was extremely painful for my engineering colleague to draw this, but I asked him to draw a hypothetical example of what a closed street would look like on Northeast 57th Avenue if council were to grant this request. As you can see, when we design a cul-de-sac, particularly if it were to come off a busy street like Killingsworth, we would have to provide a way for vehicles to turn around. We would not just simply have a stub of a dead end where vehicles had to back out onto busy Killingsworth Street. You can see from the shaded white areas on that map that the impact to properties would actually be greater, because now you would have to build a bulb out on that cul-de-sac, and there's less impact if you just simply punch the street through. So that's the extent of my presentation today. Just to make a few other comments, we have brought an extraordinary level of resources to this LID. So the cost of this LID is less than a third of what it would be for a typical unsubsidized LID. And I wanted to just pass out some amendments and just actually, Carla, I think, distributed those. So I wanted to walk you through the amendments. So what I'm requesting are 2 roll call votes from council. So we had the first set of amendments that was posted online. And I respectfully request that the council adopt these amendments, correcting some scrivener's errors, replacing exhibits F and G to reflect remonstrances received, remove 5285 Northeast 57th Avenue from the LID boundary. That property was only slated to receive partial frontage improvements, and we should grant the property owner's request to be removed from that LID. And then the last item on there was to add an emergency clause after discussing
What about the other
this.
two? There's the clarify the length of the sidewalk.
Pardon?
There were 2 more in your summary of amendments. There was 1, 2, 3 that you just said, but then also clarify the length of the sidewalk improvements and overrule the remaining remonstrances at an emergency clause.
So just to clarify how that would work, Commissioner Fritz, the length of the street would be 378 feet. The sidewalk on the west side of the street would terminate 346 feet south of Killingworth, so you have slightly offset lengths of the improvements.
So I move those amendments. Let's vote separately on adding the emergency clause. So I move.
Yes, and actually what I was going to suggest, Commissioner, is if you adopt this amendment, I'm going to take you right into the second amendment, which then removes the emergency clause. But however you want to do it.
Does it currently have an emergency clause on it?
Pardon?
I didn't think it currently had an emergency clause.
It doesn't. So the first amendment would add one, but then the second one would remove it.
So why do we just not adding it?
That works too. I'm not necessarily the expert in parliamentary procedure, so I'll defer to the city attorney.
So number 5 in this would just be overrule the remaining remonstrances.
That's fine.
So moving amendments 1 through 5.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fritz, a second from Commissioner Fish. Call the roll.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Here. Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The amendments are now on the table. Adopted.
Thank you for your patience as I tried to sync everything up with my paperwork. So let me walk you now through the second set of amendments, and I deeply appreciate all of the input from the property owners over the past 24 hours. So the first one, which appears now to be a moot point, would be to remove the emergency clause. The second amendment would expressly authorize the installation of speed bumps in this LID. So that's something that we've been discussing with the property owners all along, but I wanted to bake that into the LID formation ordinance so that the intent was very clear that by default, we plan to install speed bumps if they're warranted. The third item I have on that
ask you a question
second.
on that item? So isn't that really a matter of administration? You don't always bring speed bumps to the city council, do you?
Thank you very much, Mayor Wheeler. I appreciate you asking that question. What we're not asking the council to do is to make an engineering decision. What we're asking the council to do is to legally authorize the expenditure of LID funds to install speed bumps.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Excellent question.
Is there a motion on that?
I'll move.
Well, I think we're walking through them all, Mayor.
Oh, there's more.
And then,
Okay, I'm sorry.
yeah, they're all
so
in this.
they're coming forward
yeah.
as a set. Got it. Thank you.
So the third amendment was, I talked to the city traffic engineer this morning, and you may recall that council recently voted in favor of this 20 is plenty ordinance. And we think it makes perfect sense to add 57th on the list of streets that is posted for 20-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Why do we need to do that? Isn't it automatically 20 miles an hour?
Pardon? It's 25 right now.
I know, but everything's going down to 20.
I can't explain it. It's just when I talked to the city traffic engineer, he just said legally it's a 25-mile-an-hour street and we need to drop it down to 20. So he was fine with me offering up the amendment.
That's fine. Keep going.
So then the fourth one is to expressly authorize a deferral of repayment of the LID liens for a minimum period of not less than 5 years. So just to make it really clear, our intent here is to work with the property owners and ideally that those LID obligations wouldn't need to be paid until the house is sold. So we want people to be able to budget for this obligation and plan for it.
Isn't that unusual? Do we usually do that?
We don't usually do that, but what I try to do on all these LIDs is to be responsive to the issues that were raised. I think on this particular LID, we have 2 very large lots, which are very expensive to build frontage for. When you have a 213-foot wide lot that is wider than a downtown city block, I have 2 choices. I can either narrow a 22-foot road down to 5 feet wide, or, you understand, the math I'm dealing with here is a very wide frontage, and I know you know that. I just felt that given that we have some really large lots here, $43,000 is a really good deal for 213 feet of frontage, but it's still a large obligation.
Okay.
So that's item number 4. Item number 5, and this was suggested by the Coley Association of Neighbors, is to direct PBOT to further explore the possibility of improving additional North-South Street connection. So while the conversations have been cordial with the property owners, I think the one sticking point of respectful disagreement has been that PBOT does not believe that the solution to traffic problems on 57th is to close the street. PBOT believes that the solution to traffic problems on 57th is to have more north-south streets in Coley to more evenly disperse the traffic. And I'm not going to go into details on that today, but we actually have some ideas on how a subsequent project might implement some of that. The 6th amendment would allow the LID to pay for water meter installation solely at the abutting property owner's expense. This is something that was requested by Habitat for Humanity. The Water Bureau will get the same amount of revenue. It's just that they would be paid by the LID, and it provides the opportunity for those water meters to be financed over 20 years along with all of the infrastructure improvements for Habitat for Humanity. And then finally, the 7th amendment would be, the 7th item included in the single amendment would authorize the city engineer to omit construction by the LID of a new sidewalk at 5305 Northeast 57th Avenue. It's with a considerable degree of reluctance that I offer that particular item up, but we have one property owner from whom we need to acquire right-of-way. Right now, that property extends 30 feet into the right-of-way, and we only have a 30-foot wide right-of-way, whereas it's 60 feet wide everywhere else. And so what we want to be able to do is we're going through the engineering. We want to have the flexibility to phase the sidewalk construction. Just to be perfectly clear, if the sidewalk were not improved as part of this LID, it would be required upon a future building permit. And that's the entire package of amendments that I have, and I appreciate council's time today.
Could we amend number 7 to add? It will decide what will be required in a future building permit?
I think I put that in there in the detail. You can. Yeah, so if you look at item F on page 3, it says, I don't want to read the whole thing in detail out of respect for your time, but it just says, shall be constructed in the future solely at property owner expense.
So can I just add something like, or is this all part of the amendment, or do we need to add under number 7 per paragraph F?
No, this is all part of the amendment. So the single memo has amendments A through F.
Okay.
I think A is moot because you've already removed the emergency clause. So as a practical matter, I think we're just voting on B through F if that meets with the pleasure of the council.
Commissioner Saltzman's moved.
Second.
Commissioner Fritz seconds. Please call the roll.
Fritz.
Thank you for all your work on this. Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The amendment is adopted, now on the table. Thank you.
So the last item I just wanted to show council is this is a picture. Carla, if we can switch over to the screen. This is a picture that I took in 2011, March of 2011. There we go. So that is the 1900 block of Southeast 171st Avenue. And this is what happens when you have a very long paved street that comes up to a very short length of unpaved street. Because what happens is drivers make a mental calculation that they're willing to put up with a relatively short distance of unpaved street. And then what happens is you get these types of potholes. This is precisely why I really felt compelled to provide an administrative recommendation to council to approve this LID. It is with some degree of reluctance that I asked council to overrule the remonstrances, but I couldn't in good faith leave this type of situation for the property owners in a couple of years and fumble the football on the 1 yard line when we've worked so hard to line up the funding and narrow the scope of the street, for example, from 32 to 22 feet. And do a lot of other things to address their concerns. Yeah, so I know this is a difficult decision for council, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Good. We would have had to post lifeguards otherwise. Any
I was
further
gonna say, everybody in the
conversations?
pool.
Good. Public testimony on this item, please.
Yes, we have 7 people signed up. The first.
Colleagues, could I request that we limit testimony to 2 minutes, if for no other reason than that I think we're going to start losing our quorum at 1 p.m. So if folks could try and condense their comments into 2 minutes, that would be great. You'll see a yellow light go on in 1 minute and 30 seconds, and then you'll hear a buzzer and see a red light flashing at 2 minutes. Thank you.
The first 3 are Samuel Walker, Holly Webster, and Dale Walker.
Thank you for being here.
Hi. Thanks so much. Thank you, Andrew. Sam Walker, 5711 Northeast Emerson Street, one of the impacted property owners. I will try to limit my comments to 3 minutes. There's a lot to cover. The first is kind of an administrative item. You have in front of you a summary of the remonstrances received. I'm one of the homeowners that submitted remonstrances by the deadline. I'm going to read very quickly some of what Andrew Abbey from Portland Bureau of Transportation submitted in his packet to you. 4 written remonstrances representing owners of 4 non-exempt properties at the Northeast 57th and Killingsworth Local Improvement District were received by the filing deadline. Registering remonstrances against formation of the Local Improvement District. Total remonstrances represent 22.2% of the estimated assessment of the LID. Further down, this is Exhibit G. Council lacks jurisdiction to form the Northeast 57th and Killingsworth Local Improvement District as originally proposed because the remonstrant level of 61.2% as measured by total area is above the 60% threshold in Section 9-403 of the City Charter. What does Section 9-403 state? I happen to have that here. This is the City Charter that you guys are all bound by. If the owners of 3/5 or more in area of the property file objections, further proceedings in the making of such improvements are barred for a period of 6 months, unless the owners of 1/2 or more of the property affected subsequently petition therefore. So, What it doesn't say is that Andrew, Abby, and Portland Bureau of Transportation can modify the existing LID to remove one of the property owners so that the math works out in your favor in order to overrule the remonstrances received. I think it's pretty clear, and I don't know about you, but this looks a lot like a proceeding to me. So this does feel like, here's the word, gerrymandering. I will tell you that we did formally support the project, right? We were in support. And then we, for many reasons, right? Because it's connectivity, access to 72 bus line. And then we heard from neighbors down the street, not impacted by the LID directly, but farther south. We heard from many of the neighbors, and in the packet you have this petition that was put forth. We knocked on doors, we asked for further comment, and people are incredibly concerned. There is a groundswell of community support for doing something other than what's proposed here. So we simply wanted to take a step back. The only process that we had ahead of us, and I understand receiving remonstrances of this nature is very frustrating for you. I apologize for that. It was the only mechanism that we as citizens felt like we had at our disposal. So we followed the rules. We submitted remonstrances above the 3/5. We thought that would stop it for now, and we can further engage on the side and bring this back to you. That was our intention.
Thank you.
So where we are now is we would like additional time to have the folks that are heavily impacted by increasing traffic on a street south on 57th, increased traffic with no sidewalks, lots of families. It's already an active transportation corridor, and you will significantly degrade that by moving forward with this LID under its current design. We ask that you take a step back. Thank you.
Okay, great, and thank you. And I let you go on a little longer because my suspicion is there are a lot of people who are testifying who agree, so you don't need to repeat all of these arguments because we will ask for staff to come up and address some of them. You can just say, me too, or whatever. To keep us moving, if you agree. Thank you.
Okay. I'll go ahead and defer to Holly.
Okay, thanks. So one detail that's been left out is that this street, this section of Northeast 57th is actually referred to as a local service street. So this is currently not an access road. If you Google it, it does not show up as a throughway. So talking about blocking this road and traffic being diverted elsewhere, this is already not a heavily used road for traffic. So I don't think that this should have much of an impact to the flow of traffic. I also think that makes this a good candidate for a greenway connection between the bike access on Killingsworth to the greenway along Alberta. We don't have many, as much as we don't have north-south connections for traffic, we don't have a lot of north-south connections for pedestrians and bikes as well. Since this is already a low traffic part of the street and we're going to have that many more residents there with children at Habitat, I think this would be a good candidate to keep as a minimal impact, narrow road with possibly, sidewalk just on one side, so that's not as much of an impact to the property owners. And our priority is just to make this road safer. It is currently dangerous on many levels, and we have people, the road is mostly being used by pedestrians and by bicyclists. We have neighbors that live at the end of that road that have kids that play in the street, and I think if we're going to improve this road, there has to be some sort of gradual transition for allowing traffic to move through there. So one proposal is that, they could go forward with the improvement, but possibly block it until there's more development. If those properties are subdivided at some point in the future, then maybe we could allow more access for vehicles along that road. But I don't think that proposing to have some sort of barrier for vehicular traffic would currently impede any current flow of traffic.
Thank you.
Sure.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Dale Walker. I'm at 5711 Northeast Emerson. I just wanted to let you know I am retired on a fixed income, and though $44,000 doesn't seem like a lot of money, to me it has impact. The other thing that, and I think Holly raised this, we do have children that use 57th. The folks from Elder Place come down for walks, check out my chickens and so forth. So it's a pretty safe street right now. If we open that up, regardless of speed bumps and speed limits, people are going to cause a little concern with the neighborhood. Anyhow, thank you for allowing us to speak.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for being here, both of you. Next three, please, Carla.
Are Connor Devine, Danielle Walker, and Laura Young.
Good afternoon. Whoever's ready to go.
Please.
Okay, hi, my name is Danielle Walker. Microphones and cameras make me painfully nervous, so please bear with me.
No worries.
I live along 57th Avenue, and I'm one of the homeowners identified as part of the LID. My family's share of the cost is nearly $44,000. Just so you know, this is an overwhelming amount of money for my family to bear. It's a significant impact on my life. As you are also aware, the residents along the street are very concerned about the traffic impacts. 57th Avenue is narrow, it has no sidewalks. It is a major pedestrian path to Conomosk Park. We walk there every day. This road is not currently equipped to handle the increase in traffic that will come from the improvement of this road. And by solving this problem, you are only creating another one that until today, and last night really in our work with Andrew, up till now has been completely ignored. It was this problem we were trying to solve when we recommended that the city choose to close the road instead develop a pedestrian and cyclist path. It is my understanding that at this point in time, the city is not interested in creating a walkway-only street. For me, this has been difficult to comprehend, as the Coley Plan clearly recommends alternative low-cost street designs, including walkways, be developed rather than to traditional roads. These recommendations are stated on pages 4, 34, 38, and 39 of the Coley Plan. You cannot be surprised or frustrated with a citizen who asks the city to close a road when the city recommends it in writing. If the city has no intention on fulfilling these recommendations, I suggest you reevaluate the Coley Plan and include a realistic and implementable option. We are not the adversary. We are only working off approved documents that you have provided to us. Finally, I ask that we stay true to the process in the LID ordinance and that you do not gerrymander the LID in order to overrule our remonstrances. Instead, let us continue to work with Mr. Abbey to come to a resolution we can all support that implements the goals of the city while listening to the people most affected by the change. We have made significant progress in recent days, and I hope you will allow this to continue.
Thank you. If you were nervous, it doesn't show.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
My name is Connor Devine, and I live at 5305 Northeast 57th Avenue, directly across 57th from the Walkers. And well, first, I've been very disappointed with the way that this whole process has been handled. I don't feel like I've been communicated with properly or taken into account that my property is going to be the most impacted by this LID. And my wants and needs have been only heard through my neighbors, not from PBOT or any other avenues. But I do hope that you guys will give us opportunity to put a hold on this so that we can change my opinion of the way that proceedings have gone and we can all work together. But I also want to voice that I agree with everything that my neighbors have said so far. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. We appreciate your being here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hear me good? Okay. My name is Laura Young. I'm the chair of the Coley Association of Neighbors. And the association board submitted written testimony, which you should have in front of you. So I'll just highlight a couple of items regarding the connected Coley plan. Actually, I was actually one of the drafters of the connected Coley plan, and I can tell you the spirit and intent of the plan was to, and in the executive summary in the prologue, it says, meeting the community's goal of vibrant pedestrian-oriented Coley commercial corridor. And the plan flows from, the infrastructure and street connectivity needs of the Coley neighborhood to be addressed. The plan was never intended to reduce connectivity, but rather to provide alternative opportunities to increase connectivity. This particular street, Northeast 57th Avenue, is one of 3 local streets with continuous straight line connectivity between 42nd and 82nd Avenue, which are the collector boundaries of the Coley neighborhood. There are only these 3 streets that provide continuous connectivity. Closing one of these streets would cause a substantial impact on the surrounding streets and just increase the impact on the overburdened 60th Avenue, which is currently also being proposed to have limitations on auto access. If we lose 57th and 60th, that only leaves 72nd Avenue and 52nd Avenue, which are more than a mile apart. So there's two facets of this issue. One is the neighborhood association absolutely doesn't support closing the street. It does support the formation of an LID. All of the property owners have been offered deferrals, which would prevent them from having a monthly obligation. That is a very good option. I think possibly anecdotally, people who move into the neighborhood and move onto a gravel road don't realize they incur that obligation to improve the street at some point.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, all 3 of you. Next 3, please.
The last person I have is Thomas McElroy.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks for being here.
Commissioners. Thank you for hearing us. It's amazing what a block of dirt, pothole-riddled dirt road can do, and what it has done, what that block has done to 57th from the rest of the distance from Killingsworth to Prescott has turned it into a pretty vibrant pedestrian and bike throughway. We have I'm on 5252 Northeast 57th Avenue. My wife and my 2 young kids live there. We have a poetry post and a tiny free library and a basketball hoop out front, and those get a ton of use from people walking their dogs. We see a lot of strollers every day. My kids play out there. Shot hoops with Damian Lillard once when he was filming a part of an episode of Portlandia. That would not be the case if that block of dirt road had not slowed traffic and prevented the entirety of 57th from becoming a shortcut for 60th. And that's what really PDOT is proposing, that we turn 57th into a shortcut for 60th, which is already a very fast, functional street. It's right there, 3 blocks away. And the problem is 60th doesn't have sidewalks at this time, and so people just go through 57th. And now we're gonna have 15 more families on the corner when that Habitat for Humanity complex goes in. And so PDOT is proposing putting them on 2 high-speed streets, Northeast Killingsworth and 57th there. And I know it's painful to draw the turnaround, but how painful is it gonna be to the families who have their kids injured or worse by using 57th to create a shortcut that we don't need? We don't need it. We have 60th. There's never a traffic jam on 60th. On a busy day at rush hour, the worst traffic jam the Cully has is at the 5-point intersection at 60th, Prescott, and Cully Boulevard by the Albertsons, several blocks away. We don't need to funnel everyone through this existing pedestrian and bike walkway. And I think that should be preserved. And closing off the street to auto traffic would serve that function very well.
Thank you.
We'd like time to consider that and to review more options.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate your testimony, everybody. So I just had a question. The first individual providing testimony referred to some charter language. Can either you or legal counsel respond to that concern?
So city charter was written a very long time ago. They can be difficult to interpret at times. I think if you were to take that argument to the absurd extreme, that would mean that council couldn't even dispose of the agenda item. And keep in mind that once a LID resolution is approved, then the city auditor's office creates pending lien records.
Andrew, can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
it's late and we've had a lot of stuff today. Exhibit G to the package you gave us actually in paragraph 4 cites the charter provision.
Correct, yes.
And restates what the gentleman has already testified to. So it is before us. And your proposed way of dealing with that is also before us. But
correct. So just very simply put, Commissioner Fish, I would just say that at some level, the council has to have some degree of additional proceedings to either form or not form the LID. So I think it would be an inaccurate interpretation of city charter to infer that once you hit the 60% threshold, that somehow council is not empowered to respond to the substance of the remonstrances received. Because the council has to either amend the LID or decline to form the LID so that we can either sustain or remove the pending lien records that were created when council adopted the LID resolution.
Commissioner Daly. Sorry, then Commissioner Saltzman.
I have a question, and I'm not sure, Andrew, if you can answer this or not, but $44,000 is an extraordinary amount of money for most households. Can you explain to me how we expect these residents to come up with that money? Or if I understand we offer long-term low-interest financing, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we do offer 20-year financing, as I mentioned before, which I won't recover, as we are offering the deferral option. The one part I didn't even mention is that 46% of the cost in this LID for the non-Habitat for Humanity property owners is right-of-way acquisition. So with a simple stroke of the pen, one property owner could donate the right-of-way, and we could eliminate 46% of the cost and drop that number substantially. That is not something I have control over, but I just want to emphasize to the council it's within their ability to significantly lower those costs. If council were not to approve this LID today, then what would happen is that PBOT would sit back and wait for these property owners to pull building permits. By my rough calculations, an unsubsidized frontage improvement for $43,000 would be $147,476. And I don't want to put that property owner in the position of having to come up with that kind of money with no deferral and no financing option to build the required frontage improvements as a condition of getting a building permit.
Could you, oh, sorry, Commissioner Saltzman was next.
There was a woman who testified about doing something less than a standard street, but still a street with, I forget what we call that program, the community. You know,
yeah, I haven't been
something
involved.
we did back under Mayor Adams, you know, something less than a full-blown standard street as an option for an LID. So I wanted to ask about that, and then are we at loggerheads about the issue of closing the street? I mean, are the neighbors, that's their solution, and
right.
Ours is clearly not that.
If I may, I'll try to be extremely brief. Let me take that second question first. I would be really careful as a property owner in terms of what you wish for, because I've done LIDs before where people have had dead-end streets. They've had to drive long distances out of direction to get to where they need to go. Sometimes bad things tend to happen at dead ends. Having a dead-end street sort of introduces its own set of issues. So I'd just be, as a property owner, be very careful what we wish for. I would also just say that Northeast 60th and Killingsworth has a traffic signal, so it is a little difficult for me to rationalize why 57th would suddenly become an attractive cut-through street for people to drive north on 57th and wait against all the traffic on 57th to turn onto Killingsworth when they have a traffic signal at 60th and Killingsworth. And to respond to your first point, Commissioner, cost of hiring a contractor to do something are largely fixed. If I go to a contractor and say, instead of building a 22-foot wide street, build an 18-foot wide street, or God forbid, build an 11-foot street, the contractor is not going to give me a 50% reduction on the bid because they got to mobilize and build everything. So I think PBOT's perspective is if we're going to build a street here, let's build it properly. Something that lasts for the long term. And I think that through a collaborative effort on the right-of-way acquisition, which again is 46% of the cost of the LID, I think we have some tools at our disposal to bring these costs down to a reasonable level.
Okay. And so, I mean, as late as 10 o'clock last night, I know you were working with the neighbors on this, and so I'm just wondering, should we give some more time here? See if there might be something, but knowing it may not, and it may come down to us voting to overrule the remonstrances and make.
I think what I'm struggling with, Commissioner, is I've been asked to do something that the Coley neighborhood association doesn't support, and I don't think we can go there. What I'm suggesting is we've removed the emergency clause. You're not making a decision today. You have a week to think about this. You can decide what you want to do. And what Danielle and I talked about this morning is I'll probably meet with them this weekend. I have some other ideas that I don't want to cover now about traffic mitigation and some other things, and I just need some time to chew on that, and we'll have that conversation. But I think we need to have a decision next week because Habitat can't wait forever to start, addressing our affordable housing shortage in Portland either. So.
Okay.
Good response. Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you. The proposed width of the street is 22 feet.
Curb to curb.
Curb to curb. I have some of those in my neighborhood. They are not conducive to people zipping through. That's a very narrow street. And this is unprecedented to be allowed to having the deferral for 5 years, to adding the speed bumps in as part of it. All these other things that have already been added are things that no other neighborhood, no other LID is getting. So I personally think that you've already gone the extra mile, and I would be reluctant to go much further because I just don't see that the outcomes are going to be as feared. Just based on what's happened in my neighborhood when a 22-foot street has gone in, it has not, in fact, it's taken away our ability to get out of our neighborhood during snow days because we no longer have potholes and to slow down the slide with the ice.
Mayor?
Commissioner Fish.
So I think the council is signaling where it may land on this. Just for the record, in my service on the council, I think if I had to identify a person who goes the extra mile routinely, always, in terms of doing a very difficult task, it would be Andrew Abbey. Andrew's outstanding public servant. Mayor, I would be comfortable removing the emergency clause and having an opportunity for one last conversation, but I am prepared to vote on this, and I am concerned we are going to lose a quorum, and I may be part of the problem. So I would urge us to make a decision quickly.
So, Andrew has offered to meet with the neighbors, and the neighbors were all giving thumbs up that they would like to have that opportunity. And I don't see how waiting a week is going to make a lot of difference on this. So I would, first of all, I want to respect the fact you have put a lot of time and energy into this. And I want to be very clear, I'm not saying you haven't, but I see one more opportunity here to close the gap with the neighbors. They've taken the time to be here today. Let's respect that. So I would encourage us to move this to second reading and give Andrew that opportunity and the neighbors that one last opportunity.
And I just want to correct one thing I put in the email. The final vote would be on the 14th of March and not the 17th of March. That was a typo in my email this morning. But with that, I just recommend that council has adopted the 2 amendments proposed to the ordinance.
Correct.
So at this point, I think you're just passing it to a final vote on the 14th.
That would be correct.
And I'll have that meeting. Thank you.
And if you have other ideas that come back and you and the neighborhood and the neighbors are in agreement, we would obviously entertain an amendment at that point.
Okay.
Great. So this is the first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading as amended. Item 225, I believe Dan is going to pull that back to his office, but could you read it, please?
Item 225, adopt the allocation methodology for the local transportation infrastructure charge, establish a maximum fee, amend charge required code, and direct staff to develop additional components of neighborhood streets program.
So Dan has pulled that back to his office. Item 226, please. This is the second reading.
Okay, 226, amend public improvements code to further implement Portland in the Streets programs, amend transportation fee schedule, repeal and amend certain administrative rules.
Call the roll.
Fritz.
Aye. Sorry, aye.
I'm sorry. Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
I just want to commend the Portland Bureau of Transportation folks who worked very hard on making sure that all people can have use of our streets and for events and other things, and I think they've come up with a very user-friendly process to encourage that as well. So, good work. Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Please call 227, also a second reading.
Assess property for sidewalk repair for the Portland Bureau of Transportation.
Please call the roll.
Aye.
Fritz. Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. And last, we have the 4/5 agenda. Please read the item.
Item 227-1, authorize a memorandum of understanding with Lewis and Clark College and call to safety for the Office of On Violence Against Women fiscal year 18 grants to reduce sexual assault, domestic and dating violence, and stalking on campus program grant application.
So you have 5 minutes. I know you requested 20, but we're going to lose the quorum.
Yeah, I have to leave in like 3 minutes.
We're just letting you know that we're here to answer any questions you may have. We understand you're up against the clock. If you have any questions, please let us know. We'll answer them as quickly as we can.
Colleagues, any further questions?
This
Commissioner
is the grant
Fritz?
application, right?
Yes.
And if we get it, we have to accept the grant. You can give us more.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yes.
Very
Looks
good.
like a very good purpose. Thank you for
Any
applying.
public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Seeing none, call the roll.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. We are adjourned.
Thank you.